Take your seats. We're going to get the meeting started. Bonjour tout le monde. Welcome to the Community Services Committee for Tuesday, October 28th, 2025. Before we get started, I would like to do the land acknowledgement. Il est très important de souligner que la ville d'Ottawa se trouve sur un territoire non
Ottawa
cédé.
is built on unceded territory, Anishinaabe Algonquin territory.
Have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. We have regrets from Councillor Troster, I believe. I'm looking at our committee coordinator.
No regrets.
No regrets. We have no regrets. My apologies. And Councillor Hill, you made it in time. Perfect. If I could ask for the roll call to be done.
Councillor Brockington?
Here.
Councillor Brown?
Here.
Councillor Carr? I see you online, Councillor. Councillor Hill?
Present.
Councillor Kavanaugh?
Present.
Councillor King?
Here.
Councillor Lowe?
Here.
Conseillère Plante?
Ici.
Councillor Troster? Councillor Vice Chair Bradley?
Here.
Chair Dudas?
Present.
You have quorum, Chair.
Merci beaucoup. So we have no declarations of interest. So number 3, we have 3.1 is the CSC minutes 18 for Tuesday, September 23rd, 2025. Are those items carried?
Here.
Okay. We're going to do a consent agenda. So we'll go through things if people want me to hold it, because we do have a number of items with delegations. So 4.1, we have the municipal support for food security initiatives in Ottawa. I haven't had anyone ask me to hold it, but if you wish me to do so, now is your time. No, seeing no interest, is that item carried?
Carried.
So 5.1, the older adult plan, we do have delegations, so we're going to hold that item, and we'll return to that in a moment. And 5.2, the integrated transition to housing strategy, we also have delegations for that item, so we will hold on to those two. 6.1 is the administrative review of recreation renewable funding program. We do have staff here to speak to that if there are any questions, but there is no presentation. Did anyone wish to hold that for questions, or is that item ready to be carried? Okay, is that item carried then?
Carried.
Carried. Okay, 6.2, Community Partnership Capital Programs Annual Report. Again, we have staff here to answer any questions. Unless everyone wishes to carry that item. Is that item carried? Carried. Okay, and so we'll return back to the, I think it's 5.1. We'll go back to 5.1. So we do have the older adult plan. We don't have a presentation on file, but we will have delegations, and then we'll have staff on hand to answer any questions. So I would like to invite Bonnie Schroeder from the Council on Aging of Ottawa to get settled. We'll get started with you, Madame. Thank you for being here, Bonnie, and whenever you're ready, you have 5 minutes.
So good morning, Chair and members of the Community Services Committee. My name is Bonnie Schroeder, and I'm the Director of Age Friendly Ottawa with the Council on Aging. And I'm here today to support our organizational support for the city's older adult plan. As someone who works closely with older adults and those who support them, I see firsthand the importance of a plan to ensure Ottawa remains a truly age-friendly city, one where every resident can thrive across the lifespan. The older adult plan is more than just a policy document. It is a commitment to building a city for all ages. It recognizes that nearly 1 in 5 Ottawa residents is now over the age of 65, and that number will continue to grow to almost 1 in 4 in the next decade. That's 25% of our population. This plan provides a framework to help the city grow and adapt through safer and accessible transportation options, more affordable and accessible housing, opportunities for older adults to participate in the community, and equitable access to health and community services. There are 3 reasons why we believe this plan deserves your endorsement and implementation support over the next 5 years. First, it demonstrates both departmental leadership with staff here today and the commitment to engage with the community. The plan aligns the work of many city departments, relationships we have built over departments like Parks and Rec, Housing, Transportation, Public Health, and Community and Social Services, to name a few, and really coalescing around a unified goal, making Ottawa more age-friendly. This kind of coordination helps avoid duplication and ensures the investments, whether in benches, bus stops, did I mention snow clearing, and neighborhood health and wellness hubs to deliver the greatest impact for older residents. Second, it centers inclusion and equity. Older adults are not a homogeneous group. You hit 75, we become much more diverse. The plan's focus on equity recognizes rural and urban differences, gender differences, income levels, language, indigeneity, disability, sexual orientation, and cultural diversity, showing that Ottawa is serious about planning for all older adults, not just some. The voices of older adults, caregivers, and community partners are reflected clearly in its priorities as represented by the members of the Older Adult Plan Guidance Committee, a real testament to that community engagement. Third, it positions Ottawa as a national leader. Many Canadian cities are pursuing age-friendly strategies, but Ottawa's Older Adult Plan stands out for its measurable actions, reporting, and readiness to partner with community organizations. This is not a symbolic plan. It is a start of the fourth actionable roadmap that can strengthen collaboration with older adults and nonprofit sector, shaping the future of aging in Ottawa. Through the advisory body like the Seniors Roundtable and the Older Adult Liaisons and representation of older adults on city committees, the plan will ensure their voices help shape priorities and challenge stereotypes, not just as a one-off, but persistently with accountability to our residents. Older residents. This commitment to equity means our strategies look different in rural neighborhoods, in affordable housing, and in communities where language is itself a barrier. But true aging equity just isn't about recognizing diversity. It's about the ongoing partnership with and for older adults. That's why community engagement and the commitment to it throughout the plan design, development, and evaluation is important. As our population grows, changes, and ages, investment in accessibility, social participation, age-friendly housing, and transportation infrastructure are not costs. They are economic and civil opportunities, ensuring older adults can stay active, independent, and connected, improving community life for everyone. I urge the committee to endorse the Older Adult Plan, ensuring sustainable funding and championing its integration across municipal departments and programs that advances the well-being of Ottawa's older adults. Ottawa's future depends on how well we adapt to our growing, changing, and aging population. And this plan provides a smart, respectful, and forward-looking path to age well in Ottawa. Thank you for your attention and your continued commitment to making Ottawa one of the best cities in Canada to grow older. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bonnie, for your presentation. You have a question from Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Bonnie, and thank you for your partnership. It's not really a question, it's a thank you. Partnerships like Council on Aging are incredibly important, and just wanted to say I appreciate the work that you've been doing before we got started, and now we're working on the strategy plan, and we're coming forward, and
Yep.
I hope to see a continued support from Council on Aging.
Yes, most definitely. We'll be quite active in the roundtable and promoting the activities and taking part in the implementation of key actions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanaugh. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Schroeder, for joining us today. It's always good to see you. I echo the comments from my colleague about my appreciation for your active engagement and advocacy for older adults in the city. You're one of many organizations that do that, but you're certainly top of the list in my mind. So thank you for your work and endorsement of the plan before us. I do want to ask whether there are any areas you believe the plan could be beefed up anymore. Are there any priorities not addressed in the plan that you want to raise with us today?
Gaps, well, I do think the process of bringing in a guidance committee, previously the plan was developed by the department and was shared publicly, so our active engagement, I do think is an important one. Understanding how it fits within the department, I think is really important, and have responsibility. Housing, is a big issue for us. So, but how does that fit in with housing sitting in other departments? So those interdepartmental relationships, I think, are really important. A few years ago, the older adult plan team really opened up how the municipal government works for us and understanding and brokering those relationships. So I wouldn't say that it hasn't happened, but I want to be able to see more of that. The voices of older adults need to be around the table and represented in the task groups as the governance structure unfolds over the next couple of years. So those would be my two areas.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for coming down
Thank
today.
you.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. And Bonnie, I want to echo my colleagues and as well as all the stakeholders who have helped formulate this older adult plan. We're all going to get older and the work that is being done on this will just make our city better for everyone. So thank you very much for being here today and for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
I'd now like to invite Denise Lemire from the Centre Pauline Charon.
Oui, bonjour à tous et toutes, monsieur, madame, et surtout
Good day,
mes
everyone.
collègues du plan
Ladies and
relatif aux
gentlemen,
droits
and
de
also my
développement
colleagues
provincial. Donc,
from the
je
plan that I
suis
can see in the room.
membre
So
du
I am
comité
Denise Lemire,
programme
member
du plan relatif
of
aux
the
personnes âgées
committee
de la ville
of
d'Ottawa,
the
membre
older
aussi des
adults
conseils
group,
d'administration
and
de la
also the
FAFO
board of
régionale
management
d'Ottawa,
of
de
the
la FAFO
FAFO Régional
provinciale
of
et de
Ottawa, the
l'Assemblée de la
provincial
francophonie de
FAFO,
l'Ontario.
and the Assemblée de la
Donc, au nom de la
Francophonie de
communauté
l'Ontario. So
francophone
on
d'Ottawa,
behalf
je
of the
tiens à
Francophone community
souligner
in Ottawa,
l'importance
I'd like
fondamentale de
to
l'accès
emphasize the
équitable
importance
à des
of
activités,
access,
des services et
equitable
programmes
access
en
to
français
activities,
pour les
programs, and
personnes
services in
aînées
French
francophones
for
vivant à
older
Ottawa.
adults
La ville d'Ottawa compte
speaking
plus
French
de
in Ottawa.
165
The
000
city of Ottawa
personnes
has more than
résidentes s'identifiant comme francophones,
165,000
donc pas
people
moins de 30
identifying
000 ont
themselves
50
as
ans et
French
plus de
speaking.
notre
Some 30,000 are
clientèle cible.
50-year-old
Pour un grand nombre
and
de personnes
more.
âgées, le français
For
demeure la
several
langue du
seniors,
cœur,
the French is the
celle dans
language of the
laquelle
heart, the
s'expriment
language
avec aisance,
in which they can
comprennent
speak
les
easily,
informations essentielles
understand
et
essential
maintiennent des liens
information,
sociaux
and
et
maintain
linguistiques
social
significatifs.
links that are very
Assurer
important
l'accès
to
à des
them.
services en français n'est
Ensuring
donc pas
access to
simplement
French
une question de
services is
confort
not only a
linguistique.
question
Il
of
s'agit d'un
comfort,
droit
language comfort.
fondamental
It is
qui
a
est une
fundamental
condition de
right
participation
and
pleine et
a
entière à la vie
condition to full
communautaire.
participation to
Les
community
programmes et
life.
activités en
The
français jouent
program
un
and
rôle
activities in French
essentiel dans nos
play an
communautés
essential
francophones.
role in our
La
Francophone
santé et le
community.
bien-être en
The
favorisant
health
le
and
vieillissement en
well-being
santé, la prévention
of
de
older
l'isolement
adults,
social,
prevention
la
of social
sécurité et
isolation,
l'accessibilité aux
security, and
services en
accessibility
permettant
to
une meilleure
services
compréhension des
by allowing a
informations,
better understanding
notamment en
of
matière de santé,
information,
de services
especially
sociaux
in
et
terms
de
of health,
soutien
social
aux
services,
résidents.
and support
La
on a daily
vitalité
basis.
culturelle et
The cultural
identitaire en assurant la
vitality
transmission de la langue
also
et du
by
patrimoine
ensuring the
franco-ontarien
transmission
et
of
en
the
renforçant la cohésion
Franco-Ontarian heritage,
intergénérationnelle. La participation
the
citoyenne en offrant
participation
des
of the
lieux où les personnes aînées peuvent
citizens,
s'engager,
like older
influencer les
adults,
décisions et
they
demeurer
can
actifs
get
dans la
engaged
communauté.
and remain
Les
active in the
organismes et
community.
centres
The
francophones de vie
organizations
active
and
jouent à
Francophone
cet égard un
centers of
rôle
active
déterminant.
life play
Ils
a
rejoignent
very
des
important
personnes âgées
role.
plus isolées
They
et
reach
vulnérables, innovent dans
isolated
leur
older
programmation et
adults
contribuent directement
and
à la qualité de
contribute
vie de
directly to
milliers de
the quality
citoyens et
of life of
citoyennes de
thousands
notre ville.
of citizens.
Maintenir et renforcer leur
Maintaining and
capacité d'agir est un
reinforcing the
investissement qui
capacity of
porte des
acting
retombées
is an
sociales, économiques et
investment
communautaires
important for the
importantes
future.
pour Ottawa. Dans le cadre de la mise en œuvre du plan pour les personnes aînées, nous
during
vous
the
invitons à
for the
continuer à
implementation of
appuyer
your plan, we want you to
concrètement les
continue to
initiatives
support
francophones, notamment
the
par un
Francophone
accès
initiatives,
soutenu et
namely
clair
by
au
a
financement
sustained
municipal,
effort
des
to
mécanismes de
municipal
gouvernance
funding,
incluant les partenaires communautaires
governance
francophones,
process, including
planification
Francophone
stratégique
partners,
respectueuse
strategic
des obligations
planning
en matière
that
de
be
services en français
respectful
et des
of
réalités
French
démographiques
language
et
services
finalement une
and demographic
collaboration
realities, and
renforcée
finally,
pour
a
répondre rapidement
consolidated
et
cooperation
efficacement aux besoins
to
émergents. Il
meet
s'agit d'une
the
responsabilité
emerging
partagée
needs.
qui
This is a
contribuera à
shared
bâtir une ville plus
responsibility that will
inclusive,
help building a more inclusive
respectueuse et
city,
alignée sur son propre
respectful
engagement en
and
matière de
align on its
bilinguisme.
own
Nous vous
engagement
remercions de
towards
votre leadership
bilingualism. We
dans la
thank you
mise
for
en
your
place d'une
leadership
ville réellement
in
famille des
the
aînés, des aînés,
building
où
of
chaque
a
personne peut dire
friendly,
dignité,
older adults
sécurité
friendly
et
city,
épanouissement en français comme en
contributing to
anglais.
the
Je
security and
tiens
the
à
development in French
remercier
as
Nicolas
in
Lafontaine et
English.
Cynthia Belgique
I want to
pour
thank
l'excellent
Sylvia
travail qu'elles ont
Lafontaine
fait
and
dans le
Cynthia
cadre du
Pelletier for their
processus
work
d'encadrement du plan relatif aux personnes
in
aînées 2025-2030.
regarding the plan on senior
Ensemble, nous avons
adults.
travaillé très fort
Together, we worked
afin que le
really
plan
hard
reflète les
so
besoins de
that the
notre pays.
plan reflect
Donc,
the
merci
needs of
beaucoup
our
de votre
city.
écoute.
So thank you so much for listening to me this
Merci,
morning.
madame. C'est une
Thank
question,
you.
conseillère
A
Plante.
question from
Oui, merci
Councillor
beaucoup,
Plant.
Denise. J'espère que tu vas bien.
Thank you, Denise.
Vous
Hope
avez
you're
parlé
doing
au
well.
début de
At
la
the
question
beginning, you
d'équité
talked
et
about
comme vous
the
savez, c'est
equity
quand même une
issue.
question
And
très,
as you
très
know, in
préoccupante.
Vanier, it is a major issue for me.
L'autre spectre de la francophonie ici dans la ville,
Another
je vois souvent des
aspect of
parents qui me
francophonie
parlent
here
des leçons,
in
des
the city,
natations, les garderies.
some
Mais
parents
quels sont
often mention
idéalement
swimming
les ressources
lessons,
dont vous avez
daycare
besoin
centers, but
pour
what are the
cette
resources that
équité
you
dont vous avez
need
mentionné? Est-ce que c'est
to
comme
have
les
this
centres comme Pauline
equity that you
Charon, des
mention? Is it
Q4?
centers
C'est
like
quoi
Pauline
exactement dont vous
Charon,
cherchez à la
card
base
games? What are you
pour que
looking
les aînés
for
se sentent plus
so
impliqués dans la
that
vie
older
active ici à
adults
la ville
feel
de Vanier?
more involved in active
Moi, je te
living in Ottawa?
dirais qu'au niveau
Well, I'd tell
des
you that
services en français,
with
oui,
regards
non,
to French
de
language
programmes
services,
dans les centres
there's not enough
sportifs et de
programs
loisirs.
in sports and
Au niveau
recreation
des centres de vie
centers.
active, il
As
manque
for
du
active living
financement
centers, we
pour
don't have enough funding
avoir davantage de
to
services, moi je te dirais des
to
services,
ensure more
des
services
activités, des
like
programmes, etc.
program and activities.
Mais une affaire qui nous manque beaucoup, c'est
One thing that's really missing
l'information sur ce
is
qui existe.
information on what's offered, what's available. There's not enough
Entendons-nous.
offered.
Mais
Let's
au
be clear.
niveau de
But
l'information, puis ça, on a parlé
with
dans le
regards
plan,
to
puis il faut
information, and
mentionner
it's mentioned in the
priorité,
plan, and
ça
that's one
prend
of the
plus d'informations
priorities.
sur
We
qu'est-ce
need
qui
more
existe
information
et
on what's
puis
being
du
offered
financement pour
and
en avoir plus.
funding so that we can have
Les centres de vie
more
active, on a
activities.
des belles
Active living
programmations. On a lancé
city
un portail
centers
le
have
1er
great
octobre
programming.
avec
We
les
launched a
centres, les
portal
5
on
centres de
October
vie
1st
active
with the
francophones.
five francophone
Mais il
active
reste
living
que
centers.
il y a une
But
couche de population
there's a certain group of the
on a de la misère
population
à
that we
rejoindre,
have
par
a
exemple,
hard
les
time
50 ans,
reaching.
65 ans,
For
parce
instance,
qu'on n'a pas de
the
financement
50 to
pour ouvrir nos
65-year-old,
centres de vie
because we don't
active
have
en
funding
soirée
to
et en fin de
open
semaine.
our centers
Donc,
during the
ça
evening
serait
and
super
over the
intéressant.
weekends.
Au
So that
niveau des
would be
personnes
very
qui sont
interesting.
isolées,
Now,
on a
for
beaucoup de
isolated
difficultés à
older
les
adults, we
rejoindre.
have a
Donc,
very
ça
hard
aussi, ça
time
demanderait pas
reaching
mal
them
plus de
too. So
financement.
for that, we would need a
On
lot more
rejoint les
funds.
personnes actives,
We can
les
reach
personnes
the
aînées
active
actives dans nos centres
people,
de vie
the
active,
older adults that are
dans
active in our
probablement aussi dans les
centers,
centres de
and probably
loisirs
also in
au niveau de la
recreation
natation,
centers
etc.
and for swimming and all
Mais
this.
les personnes isolées,
But
les personnes qui
the
n'ont pas de
isolated
transport,
people that have no means
les
of
personnes là,
transportation,
même à Vanier, là, à 1
even in
kilomètre du centre
Vanier,
Pauline
at
Charon,
1
comment
kilometer
tu veux
from
qu'ils se
the
rendent au
Pauline
centre
Charon
si
Center,
il n'y a
how are they
pas
going to
de
get to the
transport
center if they don't have any
accessible ou peu de
means to get
transport
there,
accessible. Donc ça, c'est toute
or
une
if
autre
there's no
couche
accessible
de
transportation?
financement qui
So
pourrait
that's another
être
layer
super
of
intéressant
funding that
à
could
les
be
rejoindre.
really
Les inscrire
useful
au centre
so we can
de la
reach these
prescription
people. We
sociale.
can
On a des
invite them
centres qui
at our
offrent un
centers.
service de
We
prescription
have
sociale pour
a
aller
social
chercher
prescription
ces
service in 3 of
personnes-là
our centers, so we
pour
could
diminuer
reach
l'isolement
these
des
peoples
personnes
to
aînées.
reduce their
Le
isolation.
vieillissement, là, les personnes
And
là,
aging,
on vieillit tous, là.
we're all
Donc,
aging.
on va avoir
So
besoin de encore
we're going to
plus de
need
services dans
even
les prochains
more
5 ans.
services in the
Bien,
next
merci
5
beaucoup,
years.
j'apprécie. Je pense
Thank you
pas que
so
les
much.
gens
I
savent
appreciate. I don't think
nécessairement
people know
c'est quoi le centre
necessarily
Pauline Charon.
what
Question,
is
mais je
the
sais, on va
Pauline
vous
Saron
voir au
Center. will know it at the breakfast, Flocons des Neiges breakfast in the coming weeks, and a lot of people here will be volunteering. So I invite you all to come to this breakfast for Partage Vanier. I believe it's December 4th, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Kavanagh has a question. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presence here, Denise. It's important to have services and programs for French-speaking people. I thank you for speaking up for the Francophone community. It is very important, and I wanted to thank you for that.
Merci de votre intérêt et engagement.
Thank you for your commitment and engagement towards Francophonie.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Lemaire, pour
Thank
votre
you, Mrs. Lemire, for your presentation today.
We are now moving on. That's the end of the delegations. We're now moving on to any questions for staff. We do have Clara Ferrer here to answer any questions. Anyone? No, we're good. All right. Oh, sorry. Forgive me. I paused too long. No, I'm just teasing. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair, and I really did want to thank staff for their work on this report, as well as the Council for Aging for all the hard work that they do in terms of advocacy. It is definitely appreciated. I did just have a quick question. I know that the Council for Aging talked about the shift in the governance model to a more collective impact model. And we also acknowledge that there was a change in terms of the funding model as well, that has evolved. So I was just wondering if staff could talk a little bit about how the new allocation process will work in terms of funding, and how we will seek a balance between the need for funding between city departments and community agencies.
Thank you for that question, Chair. Yes, so what we're doing this year is moving the funding envelope into and under the community funding framework, council-approved policy framework. So you have, as you approve the report, you will approve our ability to move older adult priorities under the community funding framework, and we will be following the policy and guidelines already approved by council to allocate. And as part of the collective impact approach and the roundtable that's going to be formed and the voices around the table, will we be working out then the eligibility and criteria specific for that allocation to be able to balance between internal and community initiatives.
Thank you for that. I do appreciate the balance, because I do know obviously there's work that city staff will identify that will need to be undertaken, but I think it is important for us to see an expansion of funding for the community groups on the ground who are providing excellent services to older adults. And, it's also important to ensure that there's opportunities for smaller grassroots organizations to take advantage of those new funding opportunities. My last question just revolves around the specific actions that will be ideally put into place to address older adults living in poverty. So I'm just wondering, how does this plan coordinate with the poverty reduction strategy?
Thanks for that question, Chair. I'll ask Sarah Taylor to come up and answer that specific question.
Hello, Chair, and thank you for the question. So the older adult plan works very closely with the community safety wellbeing plan. For example, the staff were in attendance yesterday at the food symposium, which was a community-led collective impact way of bringing forward action, specifically targeting that. And so we're really looking at the poverty reduction from an integration lens of the plans not being separate, but understanding who's at the greatest risk of poverty in the city and how are we targeting those individuals and communities and groups through prioritizing action across the board.
I appreciate that answer and I appreciate the integrated approach. I do think that, this is a definite improvement in terms of the new plan that's before us, in terms of the engagement with the community around the collective impact model, as well as the shift to a new funding model. I think that these are very important initiatives that have been advanced. And I'm also very gratified to hear that obviously we will be working within the constructs of our other plans to ensure that this older adult plan has maximal impact. So I really once again want to thank staff for the tremendous work that they've undertaken, and also the community, the different community associations, including the Council for Aging, for their advocacy work. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Sarah, for all your work and for the whole team who are here today. It's great to see you. I see this as a beginning, that this is just a framework, a start to how we work on the issue of the fact that, as has been pointed out by Bonnie, that the older adult population is growing, and it's now 1 in 5. It will be 1 in 4. We're taking over. So be ready. But we have to look at all our programs across the city, and I think transportation is a big one. And I think that that's been a contentious issue in the past, and I want to make sure that that transportation is mostly available, price-wise, yes, but also that we're working with OC Transpo and the Transportation Department in the future to ensure that safety is taken into consideration and other factors. So I just wanted your comments on how we're working on that.
Thank you, Chair, for the question. So as was mentioned through some of the delegations, the older adult plan is dependent on cross-departmental participation. And through the development of the plan, all of the departments across the city have been engaged. Clara has briefed all of her general manager colleagues on what's coming forward, and we've started working to identify representatives from each of the departments who will contribute towards the action planning of that. So whether that's transportation or some of the recreation concerns that we heard before. So really looking to work with departments to develop the action plan moving into next year of what some of those concrete, tangible things we'll see in partnership with community through that collective impact approach based on their prioritization.
Thank you. And as we pointed out, this is a start, and we're continuing to look at focus and use that lens on programming. One of the big issues for older adults is isolation, and I appreciate we've already started some pilot projects with the NORC, the Naturally Occurring Retirement Communities, OASIS programs. Are we looking to expand these programs? Also, wellness clinics have been a huge help.
Thank you again for the question. So with the naturally occurring retirement communities, there was some previous direction from you to staff around actions to take forward on that, to document, understand them, and work with the community governance structure to bring those to the forefront. So that work will be a short-term action that occurs in 2026 and will be built into the action planning longer term as well to make sure we have a view to that as we move forward. And I'm sorry, I forgot the second part of your question.
I did too. What was? Well, that's embarrassing. Okay. I was talking about the partnerships and the NORC program, and so you pretty well answered that. Okay, let's move on. Seniors moment. No, I appreciate it. And I was thinking also in terms of the aging in place programs that we have that are in Ottawa Community Housing, which are very, very important. And I hope to see that grow. And I hope the city can help out in those, particularly those buildings. We have 22 buildings that are just dedicated to seniors, and I expect that will grow as the population grows. Seniors are living longer, so we're having people that are seniors for sometimes up to 40 years and beyond. So this is not just a growing population, but the age span is huge. As the co-liaison on older adults, it's been a privilege to work with the team. And I hope to continue that because there's so much work to be done. And I just want to thank you for your work and that we'll continue to march forward on this. Thank you.
And I would suggest Councillor Kavanagh has nothing to do with the seniors moment. It's just because you're too darn busy. You need a break. We all do. No, thank you for those questions. We have a question from Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have two questions. They both come under the Parks and Rec heading. First is just, I want to reference a quote that is in the actual report, and the quote states, "I personally make much use of city recreation programs such as fitness classes and indoor pools, but I also know that many people are completely unaware of what is offered." What's the takeaway for staff in that regard? We absolutely have fantastic recreation programming. How can we better advertise and make older adults aware of what's offered in which centers and at what cost?
Thank you, Chair. I have to say one of the very attractive programs that we have for seniors that probably is our biggest win for daytime activities is our swimming program. Both public swimming and aqua fitness. It seems to be beyond the obvious physical benefits of it is the socialization portion of it. We're currently, council recently approved a new membership structure for us. And part of that is reaching out to various populations, both to make them aware of the new program, but also to identify some of the benefits. So one of the ways that we're doing that is perhaps a new addition to what we generally do is a reach out specifically to target groups, including seniors, since we know that it is such a popular activity. We are also looking at our overall marketing schemes in terms of how we reach out to various groups. Seniors would really like us to go back to paper programs. And we've not been able to do that to any degree in the past because budgets were essentially removed for doing that kind of publicity. And the reliance on social media, though very effective. So we're looking at ways that primarily focus on site-specific programming of what's available in individual community facilities. What we know is generally that seniors like to go to the same place repeatedly. And so marketing what is there as opposed to marketing everything that's available across the city is most effective. So we're looking at strategies that are site-specific to do that. And I dare say some of that may involve going back to printed media to be able to provide them with information on a limited basis, but a very targeted basis.
Thank you. That's a very good answer, and I appreciate that information. My other question is regarding the development and construction of new parks, which we're seeing a lot more of. The city is as following our revised process where I, at least from my perspective, we're seeing more parks developed on new residential development. How do park planners use the older adult lens to ensure that amenities in parks reflect the needs of older adults?
Thank you, Chair. The first part of planning a park is really to look at the community and anticipate who will be using it. That's harder to do in new communities, but a little more precise in infill type parks that meet population growth in dense areas. So we will look at that, and we have generally in consultation with community associations and the ward councillor identified parks where specific seniors amenities might be of benefit. Additional benches, often game tables under gazebos, those kinds of things, walking paths, things that generally would appeal to seniors. The other opportunity that we have is looking through the accessibility filter. Every year, the department prepares for the accessibility advisory committee a review of the parks that we planned in the past year to get feedback in terms of overall accessibility, which some of which relates to disabilities, but often simply relates to reduced mobility, reduced ability for active participation, but looking at more opportunities for passive use of the parks. And through that, we're able to get some excellent feedback in terms of the things that are working, things that they would like to see, and then we're able to incorporate that into future years' park planning and allow us to bring in, for example, fitness equipment for parks that is more accessible for seniors. Those kinds of indications of what seniors would like to see or those with mobility impairments would like to see in our parks.
Excellent. Thank you for that as well. Madam Chair, I just want to share a best practice that I use that I think my colleagues might want to learn about, and that is a partnership I have with the management in the Hunt Club Riverside Park Community Center. We offer a coffee and tea service in the community center following older adult fitness courses and bridge and other courses that older adults come into the center. I think it's 3 days a week. And the purpose is to keep people in the center as long as possible, but to offer a social opportunity for those older adults. So when their class finishes, they just don't leave. We have sufficient space for people to sit down, have a coffee, and talk. And people stay for a good hour. And it can get a little noisy at times, but it's a good noisy. But it's something that I chip in some funds, the staff go and get all the supplies that are needed, but it's another opportunity for older adults to have that social time, and it's cheap in the grand scheme of things. So I just thought I'd share that that's what we do at one center, and it's very popular. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brockington. I'm not seeing any further questions. So is this item carried?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sarah. All right, we're moving on to item 5.2, integrated transition to housing strategy closeout. We do have a presentation from staff, and if not a presentation, a quick preamble. So we'll let staff get settled, and we also have dealt some delegations as well.
Good morning, committee. I'll just start us off as we're launching into the presentation. Bon matin, tout le monde. Au nom de l'équipe de services sociaux et
Hello, everyone.
ça me fait
On behalf of
plaisir
my
de vous présenter,
service, it's a real
avec
pleasure for me
mon collègue, Cale Brown,
to
le
present you
rapport
our report. I'm with my colleague, Cale Brown.
de la stratégie intégrée de
This is the
transition en
integrated
logement.
transition to housing
In
strategy.
2023, we were experiencing the after effects of the pandemic, characterized by an unprecedented inflow of single persons into our local shelter system. At that time, demand for emergency shelter grew by 62%. And around the same time, about 60%, actually more than 60% of single shelter users were newcomers, migrants, or asylum seekers. What began as a temporary COVID physical distancing response in city-owned community recreation centers soon led to then a much needed emergency shelter overflow solution, but this was not a sustainable solution. Something needed to be done to create greater outflowing of people from emergency shelter, in particular singles, into more permanent housing, and we needed a specific focus on sustainable solutions to transition those people and others into permanent housing. The Integrated Transition to Housing Strategy was approved in 2023 to address these issues and focus as well on ending chronic homelessness. And that was through a more supportive housing options and a greater focus on efforts on transitional housing and other housing solutions. Today, you're going to hear about the success of the strategy, the innovation and commitment of the team, and dedicated community partners who contributed to it. The accomplishments are many. Since that time and before that time, over 5,500 residents were served through the physical distancing centers overflow shelters. Through rapid rehousing, the team was able to house over 700 clients who went through those centers into permanent housing. 180 new supportive housing units have been opened and more underway. And a newcomer reception system was developed to provide permanent solutions for migrants and refugee claimants. And there's much more that you're going to hear about from the presentation. This was the result of incredible collaboration across the organization and especially with our partners in recreation, culture, and facility services. This integration to housing strategy closeout report also outlines the next steps in building the refreshed 10-year plan that will be coming to council in the new year and gives a sight line on some of the funding situations that we're going to face moving forward. None of the success and accomplishments could have been possible without the professional and dedicated team in housing and homelessness services. And I especially want to thank Cale Brown, and Nicole Sullivan and the rest of the team in Housing and Homelessness Services for their dedication on this work. And as we close out the strategy, we recognize the collective efforts of all staff across many different departments, community partners, elected officials, and residents who graciously accommodated us and hosted us in their neighborhoods. I'm proud to present with Cale the Integrated Transition to Housing Closeout Report, and I'm glad to acknowledge so many individuals who made it possible. So over to you, Cale.
Thank you, Clara, and good morning, members of council. We can go to the next slide. So this is a very exciting report, and it's not often we get to come with really good news stories from Housing and Homelessness Services. But as Clara mentioned, I'm really pleased to present where we've come over the last 5 years since the COVID pandemic. So really, we had two goals with the Integrated Transition to Housing Strategy. First was that we needed to ensure everybody who would like a shelter bed had access to one, especially throughout the winter months. And we also wanted to work towards the long-term goals that chronic homelessness is eliminated. Within the strategy, we had some short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. And again, these were focused around making sure that we had adequate capacity across the shelter system for single men and women to be able to come inside should they wish to access a bed. It was also to address the immediate pressures in the shelter system seen by an inflow of newcomers and other pressures related to the COVID pandemic and changes to our emergency shelter standards. The operation of the physical distancing centers, as we all know, was extended far beyond the requirements for COVID due to those increased and sustained capacity demands. Next slide, please. So as Clara had mentioned, this is a highly successful strategy that was focused on those long-term solutions. Of course, part of it was meeting the emergency shelter requirements with new transitional housing builds, as well as emergency shelter beds to fill that immediate need. Over the strategy, we were able to open 180 new supportive housing beds, which is an exceptional accomplishment. With the support of council, we're actually achieving during that time almost a 75% increase over what we had planned to in the 10-year housing and homelessness plan. And these type of beds are extremely important in supporting high needs clients exiting chronic homelessness or unsheltered homelessness. We're also anticipating opening another 94 shelter beds over the winter, one of which is a very exciting one that is connected to supports from the Heart Hubs, which is a provincial initiative that's going to be supporting with intensive health supports in our supportive housing build. So it's a wonderful partnership with Salus Ottawa to be able to push that through. And we're really excited to see the continued expansion and overachieving of our targets on supportive housing builds. We also had 738 clients housed, and that's from our physical distancing centers and the city-operated shelters alone. This pales in comparison to what we were able to do as a sector, and I want to extend my sincere thank you for all of the shelter system, transitional housing providers who jumped into support to make sure that we were able to provide a bed for anyone who wanted to come inside. And again, the housing numbers speak for themselves. We are focused on those long-term permanent housing solutions and setting up a strategy that makes those quick. During this strategy, we've also added 700 new permanent shelter beds and transitional housing beds. This was really focused on those permanent, sustainable solutions. So in addition to adding these beds, we got away from the emergency shelter solutions, operating in community centers and arena, which were extremely expensive for the city. And these new solutions are with our community partners who are the experts in delivering the service. With this, we also brought in a new model, such as the Matthew House, Curry House, and Stepstone House, transitional housing models where we have scattered sites throughout the city. And we've actually added close to 400 beds at this time with that strategy. So we are being very innovative as the City of Ottawa. These are highly cost-effective solutions compared to large shelters. And we look to continue growing that model to meet need. We also open 24-hour day programs, and these are really focused around people who choose not to access shelters. What we wanted to be doing with these day programs is ensuring that we can support people who choose not to access shelter with direct placements into long-term housing. With that strategy, we were actually able to house almost 50% of the people entering unsheltered homelessness last year directly into housing, which again is an exceptional accomplishment as you compare ourselves to other cities across Ontario. We have also developed or are continuing to develop and refine our newcomer reception system. We have recently issued a request for offer proposal, and Refugee 613 is a successful proponent to formalize that system. One of the things we needed to deal with these pressures was to create a system that also included the settlement journey part of the transition from shelter to long-term housing. So this is, again, a cost-effective way to make sure that we're focused on those long-term solutions and making sure people, as part of their settlement journey and integration into the Ottawa communities, that we had the sufficient system to get them through both sides of that flow. And then lastly, a very exciting one is that we purchased a supportive housing hub, which is our Kilbourne location, which we have just finished up community consultations for and are working to launch an RFO to find a developer for this site in the coming weeks. So overall, what this has allowed us to do is be much more cost effective as the city. It shifted us away from those emergency solutions that were operating in inappropriate spaces to long-term solutions with dedicated purpose-built capacity that is able to support newcomers, non-newcomers at a much cheaper cost to the city and taxpayers. What we wanted this system to be is intentional, and that's part of developing unique client pathways depending on if you're unsheltered, a newcomer, or just somebody who is coming into the shelter system locally, which we would typically see prior to the pandemic. And I think the most happy accomplishment for myself and the community is that through these strategies, we were able to close out early in the summer all of our physical distancing centers and return them back to the community. Next slide, please. So what are we seeing now ahead of going into the winter plan? So if you can see the graph, essentially what we're looking at, which is very exciting, is on the far right of that graph, you can see that the bars go higher than the lines. And that is what we've been struggling to maintain over the last few years. We now have sufficient shelter capacity for single men and women going into the winter. What we're seeing is an overall decline in both newcomers and non-newcomers. Those are the two lines entering the shelter system, which is, again, very positive news that the sustainable, cost-effective solutions are actually meeting the need in the community. Next slide, please. So that sets us up very well for what will be in our winter plan. So there's a number of things that are also ongoing to close out this strategy. We have another 100 vacant emergency shelter beds that are currently in the system. We have an additional 70 beds coming online at the St. Joseph site, which will be early November. And this was to get a couple of fire exits done, but we're excited to be able to have those as part of our winter capacity. We're also in the process of working to convert an additional 3 floors at the YMCA. That will again support close to another 100 beds within the system. So this is going to again set us up really well for the long term, and each of these solutions being permanent, cost-effective, purpose-built spaces to be able to provide transitional housing. It's also important to note within this strategy that we've really focused on shifting away from the pure emergency shelter model, though there is a need for that. We also want to make sure that we grow our options for transitional housing, having housing-focused strategies with dedicated supports for different levels of need in the community. In terms of our overflow capacity, we also have some additional bed options at our St. Joseph site using a community room. And at 250 Lanark, we also have available that site, which is a federally owned site that we would look to activate if the numbers and demand get to that point over the winter. With those strategies, we are confident that we will have sufficient capacity within the system for the long term and ensure that we do not need to use emergency solutions like community centers. We also are working to support unsheltered residents, and we've made some significant progress in how we're doing this work. We're pleased to let you know that we will bring an updated report on our sheltered response and what we're doing with our downtown safety outreach partnership in February to refine those strategies and making sure that in addition to supporting the clients whose needs are becoming more and more acute, we also have the ability to support residents and make sure our outreach teams and the people doing those services are responsive. As part of that, we're continuing with our expanded outreach day program hours in addition to having some 24-hour sites. So that's additional space should people choose to access them over the evenings and weekends. And these spaces, again, are critical over the winter when folks are not choosing to access shelter. And as I mentioned, we're also opening 94 new supportive housing sites and continuing with our Housing First program. And again, Housing First program is critical in ensuring those who are low needs clients can get into housing with light touch supports as we move through. So again, keeping that focus heavily on making sure it's sustainable, looking at long-term housing solutions, and ensuring that different needs have a place to go and support. Next slide, please. So what we are looking to do with the closeout of this strategy is really move some of those more long-term objectives, as I've mentioned, such as solving chronic homelessness, into the 10-year housing and homelessness plan. This is a great opportunity this year as we work to develop this housing and homelessness leadership table into a group that can deliver as a community approach on the city's 10-year housing and homelessness plan in partnership with the sector who does all the great work to deliver it. What we're looking at is a refined strategy that is responsive to community needs. Overall, we're looking at moving away from a 100-page prescriptive document down to something more manageable that we as a community can change on a year-to-year basis, updating those targets and priorities through the lessons learned in the integrated transition to housing strategy. So in terms of where we are with that update, it will be brought to council in March, but we have now completed our current state assessment, which included a PIC count that finished a couple weeks ago, our very large housing needs assessment, and these documents will be foundational in setting the targets and outcomes that we want to see with the updated plan. We're also working on writing the strategy currently so that it is ready to go back for community consultation ahead of bringing it forward to council in March. And we look to implement and start developing the work plan to action everything in the revised strategy in Q1 2026. So we had very good response from the community and our sector partners on what we were doing for the 10-year housing and homelessness plan. There was over 360 responses to our public survey on Engage Ottawa. We also hosted 3 public information sessions, engaged sector with 155 different partners participating in that. And we will look forward to bringing to council a what we learned summary, essentially a consultation summary in Q4 2025. So some of the key things that we're going to be looking for in this updated 10-year housing and homelessness plan that we've heard a lot at this table is around connections to health, looking to solve youth homelessness, looking to make sure that we have a variety of options for people as they exit shelter into long-term housing, a supportive housing update, in terms of how we deliver those services, making sure they're paired with help supports. So it was very positive, both from the sector and the community sides, that the needs and desires of what we need to do to solve our housing crisis in Ottawa were well aligned with where the Housing and Homelessness Leadership Table is going with the plan. Next slide, please. So this is a slide just to give a little bit of context on the financial implications that were shared in the report. So with the interim housing assistance program, we receive 40% or 43% of our overall funding request for a total of $112 million. What this means for us primarily is that the city is not going to be able to do some of the long-term cost-effective solutions that were in that proposal. One of the big components of which was a family shelter building, buying a new family shelter site or leasing one. So those type of things will not able to be implemented. As part of those directives, we are also required as the city to have a cost share component, which in year one is about 5% up until March 31st and moving to 75% in year two. What I do want to underline here is that we do not have any budget pressures resulting in this cost share. This is being done with an existing housing and homelessness services funding that was eligible for that cost share requirement under existing funding framework. We also are going to be looking at working with the partners like Toronto, who also received less than we would have liked, to work with the federal government to ensure that our sustainable, cost-effective solutions are not affected, do not affect our ability to deliver the service. So currently there's two restrictive elements within the IHAP agreement. First is which is their definition of asylum claimant. Second of which is the 90-day stay limit. So we continue to plan around this. As it stands now, we are in good shape that we can continue to deliver on this, and we will continue to maintain core services. So Ottawa, Ontario's new deal funding, that is $120 million that was given from the provincial government to support emergency shelter capacity and transitional housing capacity. This funding ends in March 31st. And it's conditional on federal funding support. Because we do have federal funding support through the IHAP program for an additional year, we are hopeful that the provincial government will come through for at least that additional year. So with those two programs, this is very much normal business for the city. For our team, what we do is scenario-based financial planning based on whether or not we receive this funding and the length. Those strategies are constantly adjusted to make sure that we can maintain core services. And staff are confident that we will be able to name core shelter, emergency shelter services and everything that we are currently delivering as we work to update the plan with a new federal budget and hearing more back from the province about the extension of New Deal funding. The other one is important to mention is our Canada-Ontario housing benefit. This is, again, one of the most important exit strategies from the shelter system. As we know, our rent geared to income housing is quite lengthy wait times to exit. So it is critical that we continue to do planning and maintain exit strategies with housing benefits across the board. So as we had brought to council early last year, we do have sufficient capacity within existing budgets to maintain outflow from the shelter system, both singles and families, with our existing housing benefits. To mention, we are in the same boat as every other municipality when it comes to our allocation for the Canada-Ontario housing benefit, and we're continuing to doing intermunicipal advocacy to leverage the government about the need we have in Ottawa. So again, we don't anticipate from any of these funding changes or potential changes any significant impacts to our existing programming. And again, we do have scenario-based financial planning that gets us a different strategy for any of these eventualities, again, with that core programming being maintained. Next slide, please. So in terms of the report recommendations and where we're headed, really it's bringing the long-term strategies within this into the 10-year housing and homelessness plan, which is again very exciting to be delivered with the Housing and Homelessness Leadership Table this year. We're also looking to close out officially the integrated transition to housing strategy. And as we saw from the data, the slides, and the capacity we've created, we do have those sustainable long-term solutions in place to be able to deal with what we expect to see over this winter. We will also be looking to bring, in addition to what I mentioned about our unsheltered strategy through the Downtown Safety Outreach Partnership, a shelter inflow and outflow strategy. And really what we're looking to do is have the policy levers that incentivize people to move into housing and prevent inflows into our shelter system, making sure that the funding we do have is set up to maintain our level of service and the need for local residents. We're also looking to do, as I mentioned, continued advocacy with other municipalities, many of which are in the same boat as us, making sure that we communicate to our senior funders, both the federal and provincial government, on our overall needs. And again, that's sharing that scenario-based costing with them so they understand implications of funding changes and where their investments are going. Lastly, of course, if there are any implications or significant changes to our service delivery model with those changes, potential changes in funding, we will look to bring that back to council if it's required. As a kind of last thing, as we complete our updated 10-year housing and homelessness plan, staff and the work will start on bringing an updated housing services long-range financial plan, which will be presented to council in the next term. With that, I just want to say a heartfelt thank you to all the communities who put up with having their community centers, their rec centers affected by having way longer sustained operations than we wanted at the city. I also want to thank members of council, the mayor's task force, who really worked during this really critical period to have the political support with our staff team to put these permanent long-term solutions in place. I think it's been highly successful in the partnership of our community partners, council, and staff at the city team to be able to deliver on this. I also want to thank the over 150 staff that we had at our physical distancing centers that supported during this critical time. With that, I just want to focus on how successful we were. We supported over 5,000 clients with our city-run operations. At times, we were supporting 450 people a night. And to give you a sense of context, we had about 850 total shelter beds in the system before we entered this. So significant operations we were able to stand up in a very short period with many staff jumping in from other departments to be able to support this emergency function and really to implement these long-term and getting our sector to where it is today. We could not have done it at Housing and Homelessness Service, Community and Social Services without the immense support from other city departments, facilities, infrastructure services. This was an all-city effort to get it done. So with that, I'll conclude the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know some folks have questions, but we have two delegations. So we're going to move to our delegations first, and then we'll come back to staff. I'd like to invite Peter Tilley from the Ottawa Mission to come. Welcome, Peter. I know you're old hat at this. You've got this down pat.
Good morning, councillors. Yes, thank you, Councillor Dudas and City Council and staff. If you'll, I'm kind of wondering what inning we're entering to. I wonder if anyone else stayed up till 3 a.m. to watch that Blue Jays game. And so maybe Councillor Hill is closest to me. He can nudge me if I start falling off somewhere. Yes, here, I thought so. So thank you for this opportunity to address City Council. I'm so happy to be here to follow up on the presentation by City staff. As many of you know, we appeared here 2 years ago and especially highlighted at this time of year that in October of 2023, the number of newcomers, refugee asylum seekers trying to get into the Ottawa Mission doors had risen to 61% of those lining up for our services at a time when we are already at full capacity. Even as recent as May 2024, our numbers showed that 46% of the people still staying at the Ottawa Mission were identified as newcomers. It was just as we shared with you back then, a really challenging time because not only do we not have the capacity, we're already at overcapacity for people who are coming in already, but we certainly didn't have the specialty services that this group of people needed. These people needed to receive their papers sometimes, their status, and so many other services that were required. So at that time, we heard of the city staff and the support of city council and that you came forward. And what was a dream was, I really hope they're going to get on that and get this done. It happened, and it happened quickly. So thank you for opening Queen Street. Thank you for opening St. Joseph Boulevard and the alleviation that's done. And I sit here before you with to report on our September numbers, 2025, that 8% of the people who are under our roof now are identifying as newcomers or refugee and asylum seekers. So that's remarkable. And Kale pushing our housing department, you've got to move them out. And same with Cornerstone, because many were comfortable and didn't want to move on, but we did our best to move them into the accommodations that were provided. It's a better setup for them as well too, and better services to meet their special needs. So thank you, city staff and council, for supporting that and alleviating that pressure. And then I thought I'd take this opportunity to save me coming back again, it being budget time, to talk about the two other areas that I do like to highlight is the challenges we're facing at the Ottawa Mission. And one is in terms of, and yes, city staff are well aware, we always include them in our request. I know times are tight and budgets are tight, but our request for an increase in the block funding that's provided to the shelters. When we break down the numbers, our block funding provision from the city comes to about $52 per person per night. We've done the math recently, and I've shared those with Kale in our one-on-one a couple of months ago. It's costing us now $91 per person per night to house someone that comes into the shelter system. That's the basic necessities, the old 3 hots and a cot, but it's actually the beds, the linens, the laundry, the meals, and then of course the frontline intervention. And it's still much cheaper than you'd see in a motel to be, costing the city $52 per person per night. I was aware when I went down last year to visit the Scott Mission in Toronto to look at getting their social enterprise up and running, similar to Chef Rick's operation here. Surprisingly, the shelters in Toronto are getting what amounts to about $120. I think it was $129 was the number per person per night. So I don't understand the disparity that happens with our two cities sometimes when it comes to provincial funds that flow down. Second request that I'm here for, of course, is that food truck program that goes to the ward of many of you councillors here, and many of you have shared with us the value that it brings to your communities, that food truck now serves over 600,000 meals a year, 41 stops, over 11,000 meals per week. Again, it was a pandemic response. We had every intention of pulling it, but we've seen the food insecurity, hunger, as I like to call it, being from the food bank days, that's out there in the community. And we just can't see, our board can't see pulling those food trucks off the road. But it is costing us, and we shared the number with city staff, $900,000 per year to run that program. We think it would cost anyone else significantly more. So in the wake of coming out of the pandemic, we faced enough stresses, but I remind you that at the Ottawa Mission, only 23% of our budget is supplemented by the city funding. The other 58%, plus the social enterprise, plus some provincial funding for our hospice and healthcare programs, comes from outside of the city. So we can't carry on with this trajectory. We're in a deficit budget this year, and 6 months into the year, we're breaking even on that deficit budget, which means we will finish the year with a deficit. We can't keep pulling out of reserves that are already becoming slowly depleted. So thank you for your attention, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions you may have. Thanks again to you all for the transitional housing strategy, which is really why I'm here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tilley. You do have several questions. I will say that while I was happy to indulge, knowing that you come to so many of our meetings and speak so willingly about the operations you have, that you did foray into budget. So I am actually going to warn my colleagues that you are welcome to ask Mr. Tilley about the things he spoke to, but because we haven't seen our budget as of yet, I will pull you back if you get too far off course. So just word to the wise. You have several questions. The first one comes from Councillor Carr.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate the update. Always happy to opine on why Toronto and Ottawa, why there's a disparity and the political makeup of the two cities, but we'll park that one. I only bring it up because you mentioned it. I just have a question in terms of operations at the mission. It's interesting to note that you're down to, you said 8% newcomers?
Yes.
So that's significant, and that really speaks to the system that we've created here. So happy to hear that. Are you still experiencing people on chairs? Are you still using your overnight chairs or not quite yet? What does that situation look like?
As Mr. Brown would tell you, we're very good at keeping our statistics. And for the month of September, there were on average 16 people per night sleeping in the plastic chairs or on the floor. You've all been to the mission. You've seen our waiting area. So numbers down from where it was at this time 2 years ago, when it was 50 to 60 people per night because of the newcomer influx. But still in September, that's September's numbers. It gives us concern for the winter months. That number will go up probably to 30, 35 people per night just because of the cold. As we know, the recent pit count numbers showed there's 500 people still sleeping in encampments or out on the streets in the city of Ottawa.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. And is it your experience, when you talked about this 8% of newcomers and trying to move them elsewhere, is it your experience that some want to stay there? And I ask that because right now I'm sitting in my ward office in Heron Road, and when it was still operating as a shelter, and we had quite a bit of capacity towards the end, and you still were over capacity. So what is your read on that situation?
Well, as we were updating city staff, we were looking at a group of displaced people. You've toured the mission. We specialize in helping low to moderate acuity people with suffering from addictions or mental health needs that we can then transition into housing. So we're very clean. We have good meals. And I just think this group of people had been displaced from here to there to there. We're now at the Ottawa mission, and it's time to move again without even knowing where they were moving to. Many of them had come from encampments. So I think just the idea of where am I moving to, not knowing where was our challenge of our housing workers, but we had to get aggressive, and Kale did push us on that. You need to be a little more aggressive to move people on, and we did that, and they did agree to move on. And I'm sure they're very comfortably housed now in those sites that have been set up on Queen Street and St. Joseph.
Okay, thank you. And you said you're great at collecting statistics. So I'm just wondering, the shelter system is ultimately designed for short-term stays, 6 months or less. I know that you have some housing, you try to get people moved through for housing, but what percentage of your overnight residents would you estimate have been staying at the mission for over a year, let's say?
It's very minimal now. We try and get people out within that 6-month range because of we just have last year's number of average night stay is down around 20, but that's on average. So those I still see some, counselor, that I would say 10 people that have severe mental health issues. We have one who grew up as a war in Sudan during the war years and suffered childhood trauma at age 8 to 10, where he was made a childhood soldier. So we still can't move him on or even barely communicate with him. He just ended up at the Ottawa mission. He's been there for about 5 or 6 years, and we're working on him we have mental health supports, as you know, that come in from CMHA and the Royal. So that's an isolated incident, but I'd say there's about 10, we see them. Those of you are Councillor Plants in our ward, we're in her ward, of course, Councillor King in Overbrook, just walking up and down the streets, talking to themselves. And if they ended up at the Mission or the Shepherds or Salvation Army or Cornerstone, sometimes they're there for a while, and that really boosts our average night of stay. But certainly we're working on, we placed, again, I remind this council that through our housing department, half of the staff who are supported by the city with diversion worker, with our veterans case manager, and the housing-based case managers that we have supplied by the city, plus our own additional housing staff, the 3 that we put on our budget. We placed 270 people into housing last year out of the Ottawa mission into housing by working with landlords.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, my last question is a little bit bolder. In the presentation that staff gave, they talked about, moving towards 24/7 model, and that was something that we used here when Heron Road was a PDC. And obviously, there's funding challenges, staffing challenges, that sort of thing. But do you ever think that the mission could adopt the 24/7 model so we're not moving people outside during the day?
You mean as far as services or drop-in? We base, and well, we have that. We have that now. You can come in anytime.
Okay.
But the beds are full by 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock. We already know people are going to be getting mats and the rest are going to wait in the waiting area. So yeah, everything, that's our biggest cost, by the way, is when I tell you $91 per person per night, you look at the frontline staff and the big part of that job, one 24/7 staff member, and the Shepherds of Good Hope have been through this with the site on Maryville Road as they realized trying to provide these supports, the wraparound supports. One 24/7 staff is the equivalent of four and a half staff doing 37.5 to 40 hours per week. It's very costly. So our 24/7 operations, the staffing component of the front line and the housekeeping and other services is a big part of that budget for the emergency services.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll let my colleagues ask questions now. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Troster.
Hi, Peter. It's nice to see you. I'm actually coming to you from Montreal, where I'm at the Alliance to End Homelessness Conference. So, this is all very timely. I'm sorry I was late for the meeting. I just want to follow up on Councillor Carr's question because, yes, a consistent problem that we have in the city is that we do have a large mobile population of unhoused and unwell folks who kind of have to wander the city from meal to meal, from service to service. Now, I know you said people can come inside, but what's working so well in the transitional housing models that the city set up is that you don't have to book your bed every day. You have a little bit of security there. It's more of a transitional model. You can stay indoors if you need to. I'm just wondering what it would take for the mission to transition to a model like that. I understand that you're a legacy shelter and that your building wasn't built that way, but I think sometimes the overflow from that legacy model is creating other problems in the rest of the city, because if people have to pack up their stuff and leave in the morning and be somewhere else for 8 hours, they're all over the place. And it's not good for the community. It's not good for them. So I'm just wondering what that could look like or how we could help you make that transition, because I know Councillor Plante might speak to this, having visited Montreal, but my understanding is that one of the legacy shelters in Montreal made a similar transition, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, to more of a transitional model.
No, it's a great question, a great suggestion, one we could consider. Just to clarify that people who book into the shelter and have a bed or a mat, some still prefer to stay down the hall on the chapel room floor on a mat because of their mental health concerns or their security concerns. Maybe they had a bad experience in a dorm room and they feel safer down the hall from the front line. But people who book into us are assigned a bed, and they need to line up at 4 o'clock to get there to identify and receive that bed. Then they can go wherever they need to go until they come back and book in. So those who had a bed assigned to them, bed 238, will have bed 238 as long as they want bed 238. The new people who come in, but we do want them to show up that night, because our commitment to the city, and it's just, we don't want to see, especially in the winter months, anyone not showing up for their bed. And maybe it does work better in the transitional centers. But we don't want to be at 2 a.m. Have 5 beds vacant when people are out on the street. So you do have to show up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon to just identify that you're there and you're going to take the same bed. Those who want a new bed, or people who show up new, if somebody wants to change rooms or something like that, because whatever reason is happening in their dorm room, they have to line up at 6 o'clock to get a new bed. So we do have people taking the new beds, and we do ask people to leave in the morning. When they come down, we don't kick them out on the street. We have that lounge and waiting area where they're welcome to stay on a hot day, on a cold day, or any day. But we do need to clean the rooms. And we do hope, especially on the nicer days, people will get out of the shelter and maybe get out and enjoy the day. It's different when it's December, January, February, of course.
Okay, I understand that, and I understand the difficulty in making that transition. The difference in the city shelters is you don't have to line up every day. And I've heard, that can suck up a chunk of your day. It can, and I heard a very compelling story from a youth who was later moved into permanent housing through Operation Come Home, who was hospitalized and left hospital against doctor's advice because he didn't want to miss lining up for his bed. And so, anyway, I think this is a broader conversation we need to have. I want to thank you for everything you're doing at the mission, but I think the issue of shelter transformation and how that could help not only you and residents, but also the rest of the city to help mitigate this problem of a wandering population of really unwell folks, kind of going from service to service and crossing the city back and forth every day. When if they have a bed and they have a place to stay, much like in our city transitional housing, perhaps they could be encouraged to stay there and receive services there if you were funded properly to do that. But I understand that is a very big shift for you at the mission. So thank you very much for everything you do.
It's a very good point, Councillor Troster, and thank you for that. And certainly over the years, I've heard of the impediment it can be to people to have to come back for 4 o'clock. It can be a challenge. We do accommodate those who are working, those who call us in advance and let us know. We'll certainly have a list of those who have jobs or are part-time or have to go visit their mother, etc. And we will accommodate that they don't have to be there at 4 as long as they give us the heads up in the morning. But it's not a daily practice. So you are right. Maybe we could restore a little dignity to some and make an exception for many, perhaps that they just know they have a bed when they come back. It's worth consideration. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And also thank you for opening a Chef Rick's in the Y in Ottawa or in Centertown. It's so fantastic for the newcomers who are living there and for the whole community. So thank you for everything that you do.
Surprise, surprise, he's ahead of his.
Thank you.
It's working out well, and we're training 5 more students a year to graduate into jobs as a result of that new location.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Troster. Councillor Kavanagh?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Peter, for coming. The mission is very much on the front lines in terms of homeless people. It's not something that the city had to do before. And so the work you're doing is very important. But I'm just wondering how many or what percentage would you say of your residents that come in have acuity issues? Is it very high? Because this is something that we're pushing for overall is supportive housing. And I'm just trying to get a sense of your clientele.
It's a great question. Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Yes, we feel that at the mission we're filling a certain niche. Certainly more of our clients are low to moderate acuity. Our hats off to the Shepherds of Good Hope, who have very moderate to high acuity clients and therefore are often reaching out to do the supportive housing models. We've seen the new bill does at that opening. That's a great partnership with Salis, Ottawa Community Housing, Options Housing, and a few other partners. So we're certainly know that supportive housing is needed, and as we've seen from some of you councillors, that when it happens and the supports aren't in place, it can be a disruption for the community, and we've seen that ourselves, as Councillor Leeper would attest to with one of our properties on Holland Avenue, where in that apartment building, there was certainly a disruption to that community when we placed someone who wasn't ready to be placed. So we know that's a need for us. Quite often, the people we're servicing and helping have addiction issues that we can put through our abstinence-focused addictions program, mental health issues that can be addressed by us working with our partners from the Royal and CMHA to come in and work with them. And yes, We support Housing First, of course, but some of those people may need 2 or 3 weeks, sometimes a month or two, we get them on track. But when we place them, as I said, those 270 people we've placed into housing, we generally place well, not often, and hopefully they become support of that community. So we're fortunate to have that low to moderate range of people, and we feel that's the void we're filling at the Ottawa Mission.
I really appreciate hearing about that. The other question that comes to mind is that we're aware that a very high proportion of those that are unhoused have Aboriginal roots and are First Nations persons. And this concerns me, and I just wanted to get a sense if we should be looking at that as a group that needs to have culturally sensitive housing in the future.
Absolutely. It's we've had, thanks to Aileen Leo's lead, we've been putting together our reconciliation action plan. We've been going out and meeting with members from the Indigenous and Inuit communities and Métis communities and having those consultations. We are in the process of developing a plan. We have on our board 2 years ago, our first Indigenous member, finally overdue, or at least in my time there, to be a voice for that population. And it is a disproportionate number of Indigenous, Inuit, and Métis people who end up on the streets quite often and suffering from all sorts of afflictions. We see it, the disproportionate number in our hospice, where unfortunately people are coming to pass away. That disproportionate number is huge, of the 21 beds. So it's something we're trying to get addressed. We had a consultation at Odawa, and I was struck to hear about some of the needs of their people, that when that time that one at 510 Rito, I believe is the address, was closed for a year and a half, how many youth they figure died of drug overdose or mental health issues, not having a place to go to assimilate to amongst their own population. So certainly it's something we're trying to be more responsive to at the Ottawa Mission, why we began several years ago our reconciliation action plan. So the Indigenous, Inuit, and Métis populations will know we're also welcoming to provide services for them that's a fit for them. We have smudging ceremonies on Wednesdays now, led by an elder. We have a country food feast where we do traditional Inuit food on the third Friday of the month, where we actually have the caribou flown in from the north that was hunted in traditional properties. We're really trying to be more responsive to our population.
I think this is important for us to know as a city. So as we're housing people, we're doing transitional housing. That's what we're talking about today. But in terms of the long term, we have to look at these populations and be respectful. Really appreciate your input.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Plante.
Yeah, hi, Peter. How are you? I hope you're doing well and enjoying your time in my neighborhood. I don't live too far from you. I just had a couple questions, and some of them may not seem related to the report, Chair. So if it is, just stop me at any time. So you said 23% of your funding is the city funding. The rest is some combination of
23%.
What do you make up the rest of the missing funding?
Well, you've seen our branding and our reach into the community. We're very fortunate that years ago, the Ottawa Mission, before my time, it was in Diane Morrison and Laird Eddy's time, they came upon that formula of those placemats that go out in a mail drop, $1.97 it was then. I'll feed a homeless person at Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter, and we still carry that on to this day. It's now $4.68, but a significant revenue amount comes from that mail drop. The rest we do through fundraising. Those food trucks that we put out on the road, we went to donors. Donors love shiny objects. The building of the Chef Rick's Enterprise at 384 Rito Street, converting that former Rito Bakery, which we know was a mess, had been sitting, and we needed to get it up to code. It cost us $1.3 million. We went to Trillium because obviously Trillium will fund a job creation program like that. We're going to Trillium again because now, as you know, we started the Superintendent Maintenance Services Training Program. We have 11 students enrolled in there now who will graduate in January. We think that's an opportunity for Trillium. So we have a great fundraising department, and we go out and raise probably more money than many organizations just because and you see us, our donors, we can reach out to a broad spectrum of donors because a lot of donors out there who may not support some of our root causes of homelessness, addictions, the meals, etc. They do like to get involved with things like job training programs,
Right.
our housing programs that place people into housing successfully. So those are things we feel are an attraction. So 58% of our funding comes from donors. About $2 million a year comes from our provincial partners, Provincial Health for the hospice, because Inner City Health, we have that partnership. They provide the nursing for the hospice and our primary care clinic. We provide the building, the meals. We cover the operational costs, utilities, et cetera, and the admin supports. So that's our partnership that comes out of our budget. And then there's that social enterprise that is Chef Rick's Catering, which is budgeted. We promised the board, if you give us 384 Rito and support that, we'll be at $1 million in revenues by year 5. Of course, Chef Rick hit over $4 million revenues by year 3. And we thank City of Ottawa for often approaching us for our catering needs. So it's a big budget now, certainly bigger than when I started. And as a result, our reserve fund is 6 months now, whereas when I started, it was getting close to 2 years when I came over from the food bank. I said, this is ridiculous. We need to spend the money the donors are giving us. And that's why we invested in the mental health, addictions, and other supports.
Okay, sorry, and I'm just going to pivot quickly to what Councillor Troster was talking about, which was the transition that Mission Brewery is doing in Montreal. They're going floor by floor and transitioning. My understanding, though, is your property is located on University of Ottawa land, correct? So you can't really do that without getting some sort of buy-in from them.
I don't know that we're necessary. I know we're next to the University of Ottawa. I don't know that we're on their land. I know we own our building and the property. We've been
You
there.
do own the building and property? Okay, because they had told
We've
me
been
that
there
they own the
since
land.
1911, so we're not paying rent to anyone. It's ours.
Okay, and then obviously because you're a ONG, I don't know what that is in English, you don't pay property taxes either, correct?
I think we'd pay reduced property taxes.
So what would it take then if like pie in the sky, you get a big bag of money? What would it take for you to do the Mission Brewery transition? Like what would it be a
build affordable housing?
A big bag of money? What would you need?
Let's get on that federal government and the provincial government. And in our reports, let's get affordable housing built so we can move people out of our shelter. I remember when I started at the Mission in 2013, Councillor Plante, the Housing First at Home Chez Soi report had just been released. It said nobody should be staying in shelters. Housing first. We need to move people into affordable housing. And our first strategic plan, here's the new ED at the time, said we better look at becoming a transitional shelter where we're not going to have 250 beds. We're going to have 30 transition beds, and we're going to specialize in what we do as abstinence-focused addictions, mental health supports, job training, employment, all those things the Mission does well. But we're not going to need these 250 beds because, hey, at home chez soi, affordable housing is going to be built. Then the National Housing Strategy came from the federal government. They're going to build 100,000 units across this country. Oops, that didn't happen. So we saw all these promises come that affordable housing was going to be built, and we would change the way we do things, and we would happily do that. But for now, if the Ottawa Mission, or I know the Shepherds has talked about in seeing the old brewery mission model, I know they went down there with you, Stephen did, to see that model. If we're going to convert a current shelter to dorm rooms or single bed apartments, we're going to need emergency shelter beds, as the city has found, for the transitional beds, at least in the near future. Yes, I wish we weren't doing what we're doing. I wish we didn't need to have this many emergency shelter beds. But again, there's people sleeping on the streets and encampments at record numbers in this city.
No, I'm not questioning that. I'm asking for your organization, for you to do what Mission Brewery is doing, and they have a variety of funding models.
I've been down there several times. I was a good friend of Matthew Pierce. I haven't yet been down since he
he's
left.
great. I'm just wondering, for you specifically, would you be willing to consider that kind of all things? We all know all the variables that are kind of out there.
Yeah,
And what
all
would it
things
take
fall
for
into
you?
place, we'd happily change that and become a transitional operation like that.
What would need to fall into place for your organization?
So again, I think we need to have more affordable housing out there where low to moderate acuity people without wraparound supports can be placed, because that's a good percentage of the people staying with us. And we'd like to move them out and know that the other supports are in place across this city. So yeah, it's more than a big bag of money. For us, it'd be more, I think, a big bag of money coming from the other level of governments to move on some of these initiatives.
So then if you had a transition housing model, your kind of clientele that you envision would, or I guess residents at that point, would be what exactly?
Again, you're in our ward, I would recommend we would downsize our shelter. And if we're going to get into transitional housing, I would recommend we start doing that in other wards, as you've been saying, that other wards step forward and take it out of the downtown core. So I would rather see, again, us reduce the number of beds we have and just specialize. We consider ourselves, I think Saeed Saya said it best once to council years ago, think of the emergency shelters as like an emergency department at a hospital. So there are going to be those desperate, last house on the block, broken people who are going to need a place to go sometime. I'd like to see us not putting so many beds up, but providing more those emergency addiction, mental health, and job training services without having to do the beds if we had the beds built in this city. So rather than transitioning into an apartment building, I'd rather see us become client services or something like that. And let's move people out of the downtown core, as you have been saying, and move them into some of the other wards if the transitional and affordable housing was being built. Look at these builds that are happening. They're just high rent builds. If they're not condominiums, they're apartment buildings that are not going to be affordable housing.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hill.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Peter. In an environment where we have limited resources, and certainly there's more that we would like to do with what we need to do, I guess my question for you is, how are we as a city doing at identifying those who are in need of your services that are either serving military or veterans, for which we can then compartmentalize our support to them in a way that allows us to draw a direct line to federal funding and preserve some of our municipal funding for those that are not potentially in a position where they could take advantage of those services?
That's a great question. I know it's one after your own heart, of course, Councillor Hill. So I'm happy to report that we had a wrap-up meeting in the Ottawa Mission. We hosted the board members from Soldiers Helping Soldiers, which is a group I was part of with General Stu Bear that we founded 7-8 years ago. And part of our update was thanks to the city providing us with a veterans case manager in the year and a half that she's been in that position. She has seen and worked with over 60 veterans. She, on her case file, she normally has 14 or 15 at a time. She's placed several of them into Veterans House. She's placed at least 9 of them, I believe, into housing, and has provided them with all other sorts. So the pandemic killed Soldiers Helping Soldiers because we were Tuesday mornings. The military would come in uniform and serve breakfast, and hopefully people would identify as soldiers, and then we could make sure, what are you doing here at a homeless shelter? Are you aware of the supports you can get? And we never really recovered from the pandemic, but how delighted General Bear was to hear of that we have this veterans case manager from the city. And I believe it was federal government funding, was it, Kale, that came down through. So that one staff position, and the mission has that position for all shelters in the community, I believe. We've got the right person in place now. So it's better than it was, much better. And we were happy to close down our group with knowing that person's in place. But still, the biggest challenge, as we've all seen, is a lot of veterans don't want to identify as veterans.
No, I appreciate that, Peter, and I'll follow that up with staff certainly, because in an environment where all we hear on the news is that the federal government's striving towards a 5% GDP for NATO targets and such, I think there's a place where we want to try to leverage those federal funds into expenditures here in the community that will make a genuine difference to our soldiers and veterans. as an option. But a sincere thank you to you, Peter, and to your entire staff and team for all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Carr.
Yeah, thanks very much. Sorry to get back on the board. I just had a quick clarification, Peter. You mentioned about your model being abstinence-based. Did I understand that correctly?
We do harm reduction, certainly, of course. We do everything. Everyone is welcome under our roof, but our unique focus when we moved the Lifehouse Addictions program offsite, because we realized when you get beyond the 1 month of being substance free, and we do test, we do test. So we did want to do more of an investment in a 24/7 offsite, 4 to 5 month intensive addiction and trauma services program that graduated 23 people last year. So again, we know this population and how hard they are on substances. And I just think it's unique and it's kind of cool that we have that many people who can make it beyond that first year and hopefully get into one of our job training programs, a population that many give up on often. And hey, I've been down the journey myself. So when I came to the mission, it was, I think we can do better to provide a better service. So certainly we do harm reduction. We support people through harm reduction. We don't have a supervised injection site at the Ottawa mission, but we encourage people to go to one of the sites nearby if they are going to use drugs. And we're certainly in tune with those who are in the back parking lot injecting. We have cameras and frontline staff who do regular rounds. So we're there to support them in case they do need naloxone or other supports. But in the meantime, if somebody after a month of going to day program or talking with one of our counselors, even a client service person who's trying to move them into housing says, I'd like to get better, we'll certainly begin the transition into the abstinence-focused addictions program.
Okay, but your housing, like your mixed-use housing sort of that's on Holland Avenue or whatever, is there a requirement? Is that abstinence-based?
Yeah, if somebody, but again, so we have, Holland is a good model that of the 36 units there, 23 pay full market rent, and that supports the other units, or 20, units pay full market rent, and that supports the 16 units that will come in to be people who come from our addictions program. But if somebody relapses, they're not being kicked out on the street. We'll support them. We'll be with them. We'll work with them. We'll invite them to come back into our addictions program while we hold their apartment. So we recognize when I say abstinence focused, that's what it is, focused. It's a goal. But certainly we have a recognition of the issues that many people bring to the table when they enter our addictions program.
Okay, thanks. I might follow up with you separately just to understand the different housing in your portfolio and everything. I won't take any more time here. Thanks, Peter.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to be brief. I wanted to thank Peter, his team, the mission for all the incredible work that you undertake on behalf of the community. I think it's very important that you come before us and demonstrate how you do innovate in terms of your organization and in terms of the offerings. And those are seen in terms of the wide breadth and depth of programming. I think it's very important, the food security elements that have benefited Overbrook and other neighborhoods as well. The workforce training, which is branching out from, food and hospitality to building maintenance. We see that you are interested in innovating to the point of transitioning the shelter to other forms of housing provision if possible. But I think what we've heard is very clear, the strong advocacy that you're bringing to this committee, to council, and generally to other senior levels of government to really underline that if you want to see innovation and improvement, there needs to be investment. So I just want you to know that we're hearing that message loud and clear. It's a very important one. And we're so pleased that you continuously articulate that to the community on an ongoing basis.
Yes, and you'll notice when we did the news release, and we do get good media attention, as you've seen when we do these excellent reports that Aileen has put together 2 years ago. It was no more waiting and then still waiting. And we have pushed the finger hard, point up to the other two levels of government. Congrats to this city and the city staff and you councillors with your budgets. That can't be deficit budgets, doing what you can in the face of all your challenges. So we certainly understand when we come with a request, but we also do want to continue the work we're doing, but the emergency piece is not the answer, but it's still a costly piece, and it's what's there for now.
Well, we appreciate the advocacy. The support is necessary. I mean, this report itself identified a funding gap of $40 million. We need to ensure that we continue strong advocacy so that the other levels of government also step up and support the innovation that you're undertaking to see a transition from ideally emergency services to things that are more permanent and that provide more benefit to community members. So once again, thank you so much for your delegation. It's much appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor King.
Thank you so much, Councillor Peter. Thank you. Thank you and your team for everything they do. You guys are on the front lines. All of our emergency shelters are. And, we have come so far from when the integrated transition to housing plan was launched and the work we've done. And the city couldn't do that without partners like you. So I wanted to add my accolades and appreciation. I understand you snuck in a little budget comment. That is absolutely fine. We've ruminated on that. We will bring that into our future conversations, whether you're present there or not. But we do appreciate the work you do, and we would take that into consideration in future conversations. So thank you.
And thanks for the great questions.
Thank you for
Great
being here.
ideas too. Thank you. Certainly much to consider.
Thank you. We have our next delegation is Mark Macaulay from Ottawa Salis. And Mark, I believe you're online.
Yes, good afternoon, or good morning, I should say, Chair and members of Council. I'm here today to express our strong support for the closeout of the integrated transition to housing strategy and its integration into the refreshed 10-year housing and homelessness plan. The ITHS has been a pivotal strategy in responding to the surge in shelter demand, and Ottawa Salis was proud to be a part of and contribute to this, particularly through the expansion of supportive housing and wraparound support services. The creation of over 180 new supportive housing units, with 94 more coming on this winter, is a testament to what we can achieve together. These homes offer stability, dignity, and the clinical supports necessary to help individuals thrive. We also commend the Enhanced Housing Allowance Benefit Pilot, which helped 157 individuals transition from emergency overflow centers into permanent housing. This flexible, targeted rent benefit is a powerful tool, and we encouraged its expansion within the 10-year housing and homelessness plan. Ottawa Salis is also a proud supporter of the efforts of the Housing and Homelessness Leadership Table. This collaborative model, bringing together different service providers, Indigenous providers, and city staff, has enabled us to be well positioned to respond with agility and scale for solutions that are very resource effective. And I have to say, in my almost 30 years career, it's a true highlight to see this coming together. It's a model of shared accountability and innovation that we believe should continue to guide future planning and implementation. We will continue to encourage and support community partners to move away from asking who should lead this and to asking how do we lead this together. As we move forward, Ottawa Salis remains committed to working with our partners to ensure that everyone in Ottawa has access to stable, supportive, and affordable housing. Thank you for your leadership and continued investment in solutions that change lives. We really love what's happening. We love this report. There's a lot to do, but it's that old adage of how to eat an elephant one bite at a time. And let's just say our city staff have taken a lot of bites out of that big elephant, and this report shows that well. So thank you to the city staff for really all their work and for City Council in supporting these efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. You do have some questions. I will say, I think in all my time on council, that's the first time I've ever heard anyone say they loved a report. I think we're going to take note of that, and it's very much appreciated. I'm sure many people liked reports, adored them, but loved them. That is very, very strong words and very much appreciated. You have a question from Councillor Troster.
Thank you. Hi, nice to see you again, Mark. I was just wondering, so when the Auditor General released a report on supportive housing in Ottawa, what she observed is something that we've been observing in my office, which is that the folks with the highest needs are not getting housed because they're unlikely to be successful in housing without a very high level of support. And my understanding is that Salus is working with the Heart Hub in Somerset West, and that you will soon be opening new highly supportive housing. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to the level of support, like what will actually be in that housing, because I think this is really part of the solution. Because, you know, as Peter mentioned, there are very, very few facilities that are set up to house people in the greatest needs. And those are the folks, frankly, that are causing the most social disorder in the neighborhood. If someone is unwell and screaming because their mental health is not being addressed, it has a ripple effect on the whole community.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Troster. I think our focus will be medium to high level acuity, but with that will be the appropriate amount of supports. And I think that that's what's really important to highlight, is it's not just a case manager with this. We're looking at full wraparound supports, from medical supports, counseling supports, a recreologist, an occupational therapist, to really allow us to understand the need of the client and how do we best serve them. Because as I'm sure you're aware, when someone comes in, typically, that first little bit, you really don't know what's going on with them. It takes anywhere up to 6 months to really understand what the issues are that they're presenting and how we best support them. So that's our focus there at that site.
That's fantastic. And I wish we could just photocopy that multiple times across the city, because, I'll have some questions for staff, but I'm actually really interested to know if we have an estimate of how many people are actually in the highest need in our city, because I think if we focused on those folks, it would have such a dramatic impact, particularly on our downtown neighborhoods and the health and safety of everyone. So thank you so much. The work you do makes me enormously hopeful.
If I could, suggest one thing, is that what's really important as we go ahead and look at different levels of acuity and how we best support them is to think also about flow. And the enhanced rent supplement benefit is really something that helps us to move people into other more appropriate rental units for them. And then we allow the right supports in the right place for them. So that flow part will be an important part as we take into consideration.
Thank you so much, Councillor. Thank you, Mark. You have a question from Councillor Carr.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm going to have a little bit of a continuation of Councillor Troster's questions, just in terms of, so you mentioned your units, so low to medium acuity, correct?
For our Salus serves across the transition, like we have transitional programs, but we also have low to medium and medium to high. And in many cases, someone may come in and they're identified as medium, but it actually is more high, because as someone settles into their housing, is the issues related to trauma and that often arise. And so it's more in high acuity, but it's, if you think of it more cyclical, is that they're not necessarily high acuity all the time, but as they progress into settling into their home, and those issues will come up through that time.
Okay, perfect. And I noticed in staff's presentation that they talk about 94 supportive housing units opening up shortly. I assume those are your 54 on Capilano and the 40 on Athlone that are reopening?
That is
essentially correct. So you're the entire supportive housing contribution, I guess, currently. I saw you last week at the Bumblebee announcement. I just have a question about the supportive housing piece there. So that, I understand, this is something you worked on with OCH, with options, with Gignal, nonprofit housing, but there's other supportive housing providers that are part of this Bumblebee project as well, correct?
That is correct. This is a community response. What we did is the group that came together was a small group to come up with a solution that we think would apply across the sector. And it's something that is meant to apply with all partners. And we have been throughout the process talking with the other partners across the supportive housing providers who are supportive with what we're doing.
Okay, and are all those providers to do with mental health or addictions? And the reason I ask that question is because as someone who is the council liaison to the Accessibility Advisory Committee, I frequently hear from providers, Ottawa Carleton Life Skills. I've talked to Personal Choice Independent Living about the fact that, supportive housing for people with disabilities is something, whether they be developmental or physical, is something that, there's a big, long wait list for these folks as well. Recently met with Developmental Services. And does your Bumblebee model include these? Are you really focused more on the mental health addiction side of things?
It's a great question. So what we're starting off with is mental health and addictions in supportive housing. But the concept behind Bumblebee is, if we keep in mind that many of the smaller providers have a very difficult time finding the funds and having the resources to develop something. So having someone like OCH who can be the backstop to help support, but at the same time, it gives those by, instead of reacting to funding dollars coming down, getting something shovel ready and planning forward allows the smaller providers in our community to say, oh, in 2 years, in 3 years, we're going to have a building coming online. So it allows them to line up the resources for that. And that's the beauty of this, is that it's really changing us from a reactive system to a proactive system. And it's allowing us to move away from two different funding pockets that are not lining up for supports and capital resources. It allows us time to actually start bringing them together and moves away from a silo approach into a more integrated community approach.
Thanks. I really appreciate hearing that, because I think that we talk about, we see the highest acuity, we see the folks downtown, we see the people that need supportive housing dealing with mental health and addictions. But at the same time, we have a brewing crisis in healthcare with people with disabilities, with group homes don't exist the same way that they used to. So people with developmental disabilities, I ran into Dr. Etches recently at the hospital talking about how some families can't support the needs of their medically complex children because there's no housing options. So I think it's great that we're moving in that proactive direction and that we're looking not just at the immediate crisis, but also that forward planning that Bumblebee can provide.
If I could reiterate, it's my, you'll probably hear me in the coming years say this many times, is it's not who will lead it, it's how do we lead this together. That is our power, really it's our power as a community coming together. And what we need to do is rewire the system. And when we start thinking about system and flow, and we think of the capacity, those problems will start to take care of themselves. But if we keep going in silos, then each individual organization's problem will still be there. And it's easy to say this, it's a lot of hard work, but I think it's absolutely strategically essential for us to have that mindset and that thinking. And I think the city, what I'm seeing, and that's why I say I love the report, is because that thinking is coming in there. And I think it's something for Ottawa to be really proud of.
Yeah, I agree. And I could never have dreamed that when I was elected and so frustrated with my community centers being taken over, 2 of them at the time, that we would have developed this stream for newcomers so quickly, and that now the Bumblebee model is amazing. And I, as a member of the OCH board, certainly we heard about that for a long time before it was announced. And I think it's wonderful. And I know, Mark, that you're also working with Matthew Perry House and phenomenal efforts in the community. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mark, for coming out today and speaking on this important issue, and your very enthusiastic support. Very much appreciated. As is mentioned, you were there for the Bumblebee announcement, and that's a big part of what we're doing as we move through transition to and the next steps. And I appreciate that. And I know Salis is very involved. So in terms of while people are in transition, how do you feel that we should look after people? Because there are acuity issues through the transitional housing period, and how that should be looked into.
I think it's a great question. I see transition as an opportunity, and that's the opportunity to better understand our clients. And what I would encourage the city, and it's something that Salis we've been doing for years, is we use an occupational therapist to understand the individual's abilities. We also received a grant from a foundation in Ottawa to hire a behavioral therapist, and we're working with the Ottawa hospital staff on behavioral therapists to look at those specific individuals and behaviors individuals have. And in the transitional housing, the real opportunity is for us to set someone up for success. I would encourage, as we start to think about transition, is giving wraparound supports in there, thinking about that person. What do they need to be successful for independent living? And having a solid clinical understanding of their needs can help us do that. So that's where we need to think beyond case managers and start thinking about our occupational behavioral therapists and those specific resources that can really enhance our capacity to get the right person in the right place with the right supports.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I think that really fits well in terms of the whole idea of transitional. And of course, the next question is that we need, or not question, but we need more funding for that supportive housing so that people can have what they need. So appreciate your work on that. I know Salis obviously is a very big partner, and your work with Matthew Perry House and your partnership with OCH. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you for everything Salis does for our community. We now are moving on to questions to staff. Councillor Troster, if you want to kick us off.
Sure. Thank you so much. First of all, I want to say congratulations to everyone on city staff who fulfilled our promise to residents that we would return community centers to community use. And I just want to say I have received no complaints about the transitional housing program on Queen Street or the newcomer reception housing at the Y. So that has been enormously successful, and I'm very excited for us to build on that model. And also a wonderful byproduct of the city helping to renovate those floors at the Y is that the Y is going to stay in Centertown. So it's a win for everyone. So thank you so much in that regard. I do have a question because you mentioned funding multiple centers to be 24-hour day centers, but my understanding right now is that the only one running as close to possible as 24/7 is Center 507 in my ward. Is that correct?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that is correct. So I think there may have been confusion in the presentation. We were referring to the 24/7 model. We're trying to move to expanded day programming. We weren't referring in that context to the shelter model. That most cases, all of them are 24 hours.
Okay, that's good to know. And you and I have talked about this extensively, but I'll just put it on the record again that the overflow from Center 507 is out of control right now in my ward. To only have one facility offering a low barrier 24-hour drop-in as an alternative to shelter has created some real challenges. There's a school right nearby, my daughter's school actually. There are a lot of residents who live near there. And one of the challenges is not when folks are indoors, it's when they leave the facility. And we see this with any high acuity facility in the city. Now, I am happy that we have funded Center 507 to have outreach workers working around the perimeter of the facility. That has helped to some degree, but I'm just wondering if you could update us on the plan to open another space to help relieve that overflow, because the residents and businesses in that area are really struggling right now.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Chair. With that is the in-camera response funding from the federal government as a reminder for folks around the table. What we're waiting for right now is some various site assessments that we're looking to get this built quickly. What we want to make sure in terms of like environmental impact assessments is that work's been completed. So we choose a site that this can be done rapidly and not require a significant amount of remediation. So we expect to have an update closer to the end of November in terms of what site we would be moving forward with. And just for your knowledge as well, should that not be more immediate, we're also pursuing other options through other funding that we can work to enhance, such as the Emergency Treatment Fund. So we're looking at all funding options. We do know this is a critical need around the community and is having massive impacts to your community. So thank you for that. And just let you know we are on it and looking at various options.
Yeah, and thank you so much for that, because it's really urgent and the situation has really deteriorated in that part of the neighborhood, and it's because of unmet need. And of course, when folks are really unwell and behavior gets out of control and it creates social disorder, then we're into policing issues where we just need more services for people. And of course, policing if there are serious crimes being committed. My other question for you is, I know we've had conversations both at this committee and privately about a lot of those outreach services that are being funded through your department to help with some of this overflow and to help with street involved populations. I know there are many different services that touch my neighborhood that are all available from different phone numbers at different times of the day. And I know we've had a conversation with your department about the need to get them on some sort of central dispatch so that help is always available. Where are we on that project in relation to the general housing and homelessness file?
Thank you, Chair. So a significant update will be brought back to this committee in February in terms of where we are with the overall strategy. I can tell you right now, we're in the works of working to develop. We actually already have an app we use with our community engagement team locally at the city. So what we're looking to do is expand that to be able to do more of a dispatch function. With that, we're going to be re-looking at how do we utilize our community engagement teams across the board to reduce overlap, to make sure our hours are covering as much as possible with those specialty needs around the neighborhoods, with places like 454 that need a specific project plan to deal with those hotspot areas. So as part of this plan as well, say it's beyond community and social services, it's working very closely with police partners by law to make sure that that dispatch escalates from social services when the social services intervention doesn't work. So that's the critical piece we're looking to formalize in that report in February.
That's great. I'm really looking forward to that. I'll tell you a good story is because of the city funding outreach workers at Center 507. We had guests from the Bloomberg Foundation. We were on Bank Street. There was a person who was really not doing well on a doorstep. I initially said to my staff member, okay, let's call Anchor. And I turned around and those two workers from 507 were walking right down the street. And I was able to say, can you go help this woman? And they did. And so that's what I'm looking at. How can we maximize all of those bodies on the street to make sure that there's help during critical hours like school pickup, school drop off, when businesses are opening and closing, because this overflow issue with folks experiencing homelessness and addiction has just created a level of chaos that is very challenging to deal with. And as I've said, I often feel like I'm running a dispatch from my own inbox, which is not sustainable. I'm just wondering, from the city's perspective, I know we asked Peter about this idea of shelter transformation. Is the city or is your staff looking at all at how we can help transition some of those emergency shelters into allowing people to stay a bit longer? Because again, this is something Councillor Plant and I discuss all the time, that this mobile population of folks moving from service to service through the day and not really having a place to be is part of what's also causing some chaos in our downtown neighborhoods.
Thank you, Chair. It's a good question. So as we heard from Peter, there is an openness to do this and look at how we can do it. One of the critical pieces, I'll say from the shelter side, as we heard from Peter, we don't fund them enough to do core operations, let alone adding things like this. So I mentioned that emergency treatment fund. One of the things we're going to be talking to the community about is this something we could fund through this new federal program, which has a 2025 call for proposals out. So this is something we know we desperately need. And hearing from our low barrier drop-in centers like 454 and 507, this space is desperately needed. So just so you know, this is on the radar as well with the Housing and Homelessness Leadership Table, as we need a permanent long-term solution to this. But also I think critically is the problems today, and we recognize that, and looking at what can we implement quickly, and that's using the existing space we have with the shelters. So it is on the radar, and we're hoping to have something of an update in the coming months as we look at that other funding.
That's great. And just one more question. I know we're getting an update coming up on officially on encampment response, but as many of us know, we have a pretty clear picture of who cannot or will not go to shelter. It's often male, female couples, people with serious and addiction issues, people with a pet, people who don't want to give up all their stuff. Those are the folks who are choosing to sleep outside or they feel they have no choice. I'm just wondering, are we looking at new shelter options or housing options for those folks? Is there a way that your team is tackling the people who are not accessing our current systems? I had a young man die in Minto Park a couple of months ago, and I went to the memorial with his family. He did not feel safe entering shelter, and he ultimately died outside. It's very frustrating when the help we're offering to people is not necessarily the help that they need or that they'll accept. And so I'm just wondering where we are on that critical issue.
Thank you, Chair. It's a really good question. So one of the things I'll say in the integrated transition to housing strategy is we are moving towards more co-gender options. So where we have a low needs service, one of the things we feel often is they don't feel safe in some of those emergency shelter solutions, which are typically focused on having health supports, supporting higher needs residents. So what we're looking to do is continue to expand on our transitional housing model. And one of the things the Housing Homelessness Leadership Table is going to be looking at is how do we create flow within the system? So making sure people have access to the shelter space that is the most appropriate. If you're a low needs person, we want you at a low needs shelter to move you out quickly. If you're higher needs, you need to be at those higher needs shelters, but with also those wraparound medical supports. So again, you're working on that issue so that you can get into long-term housing. I will say that it's extremely challenging in terms of doing new dedicated shelter space for pets. That's one we hear come up very frequently. So what we do try and do is we partnered with several organizations across the shelter system that do pet care for people. We know that still doesn't allow you to access shelter with your pet. And really the challenge has always been, as we've seen with the shelter space we've been creating, is we need for primarily space for people to come inside. And as we look at numbers reducing, which is very happy, I think we're going to continue to look at options for couples, pets, working with the Violence Against Women shelter at the HHLT to see, can we better utilize the space we have if we see the numbers continue to go down? So it's always about looking at cost in the buildings we have, but the happy part is we have better assets to look at across the board to be able to maybe deliver some of those services in the future.
Well, thank you so much for looking at that. One of the hardest conversations I have ever had was with a constituent who is experiencing intimate partner violence. There were no spaces available in the women's shelters, who had to go to SHAPS and had to relinquish her pet, to a service that took care of it. But she was devastated, especially as a survivor of domestic violence, because that pet provided a lot of comfort to her. So anyway, thank you so much for everything you're doing. To hear the statistic that we went from 60% of people staying at the mission being newcomers to only 8%, that is a huge shift. So, and I've also seen the new Cornerstone shelter is just miles ahead of the one that was in my ward that was really inadequate. So thank you so much for all the work that you're doing, and we'll just keep pushing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for all the work you're doing. I see it right in my community, and I know that you're working hard. I'd like to talk about family transitional housing, and I want to get a sense of whether the growth is still there, because we talked about, you talked about the 452% increase with single adults. But how is it reflected in families? Because it's hard to know, but there's sort of a blend of both asylum seekers and those that are families that are without housing. And what is the trend and how we're dealing with it?
Thank you for the question, Chair. So in terms of families, that's really why we're bringing that shelter inflow outflow strategy in February. What we're seeing is we've kind of, I'll say, solved briefly, at least for the emergency solutions through the transitional housing strategy. Our next big thing is families. We've seen an increase of almost 100% in less than a year for the number of people coming in. In terms of the composition of what type of people we're serving in family shelter, it's about 70% newcomers. So a big piece of our strategy as well is continuing to push the federal government to have that adequate strategy and funding to make sure that we're doing this. One critical piece we're looking at doing to accommodate this is we've actually just closed recently a request for offer. What we need is more dedicated space with 24-hour on-site support like we have at the Corkstown site. I know you're very familiar with, and having additional facilities like that. It continues to be extremely challenging to meet the need with overflow hotels, which again is not dedicated purpose-built space. So our focus right now is making sure that we limit inflow to the city in terms of who's coming into homelessness with housing loss prevention supports, really bolstering things there, while also making sure that we have policies in place to encourage people into housing. What we don't want to see is long-term stays in hotels, which we do want to see, and that's what we'll be bringing with that updated strategy, is people taking housing benefits and taking the supports we have with case management to rapidly move into that long-term housing.
I appreciate that. So we're seeing, we're reducing the amount of motels that we're using. Is that what you're saying? I'm talking for families particularly.
Thank you, Chair. That is the hope in the long term. As you just heard, we've increased hotel usage massively over the last year just to accommodate this overflow. But we are looking for new permanent dedicated space. So again, with our various funding question marks, we're kind of working through what size building we can do, but we're looking at purchase lease options that the city will have for the long term, like our Corkstown site, and making sure that we have an efficient model not scattered across the city to provide those case management supports.
And it's a good site. It was a retirement home, so it's got the space inside. The only issue, it doesn't have much space outside for kids to play, that kind of thing. So you know, it was at the right time and right place to house families. Appreciate that, though. Hopefully, we'll find places in the future that have that particular concern, because we did have the Carling shelter that did have more space at the back. And we now have the Cornerstone, which is overflowing. We tend to think of the single adult asylum seekers as men, but there's obviously a lot of women. And I don't know what the percentage is there, but I just want to get some comments about the fact that, you know, they're turning people away at Cornerstone, and that's a concern. There doesn't seem to be enough space. So how are we dealing with that?
Thank you for the question, Sharon. It's a very good point. Cornerstone offers an excellent service. And I just want to comment on your earlier point too. We at the city, although we fund a lot of these programs, it's the exceptional service providers and partners that we work with that are doing the amazing work on the ground. And Cornerstone's a great example of that. People want to go to Cornerstone. One of the great things with this strategy that we're going to have flexibility, similar to the pets, couples, things we need to discuss as a sector, is we'll have the opportunity with beds in the new facilities such as Queen Street, where we've dedicated a floor for women. We did see this increase in demand, and we're making sure that as we see the numbers, do our predictive winter planning in, you know, year over year, that we adjust what shelter space we have available to. Again, the really nice part with this strategy is we've intentionally thought about this from the beginning when we've got these sites for newcomers, non-newcomers, and making sure that we can continue to shift bed allocations between men and women to suit the needs of what we're seeing in the community.
I appreciate that. And I think it's helpful to continue to educate people in the communities to get an understanding of where these people are from and what, you know, the fact that their goal is to get housed just like everybody else, and that that they're not there for long term. That I don't know what the average stay is now for families, but that's always good to know if that's holding. So, and what is the average now?
Currently, we'd be up closer to 8 months. So it's increasing. And just to comment on how we're looking, what we're seeing is a decrease. Not so much we're doing a bad job at housing people. We're seeing a decrease in outflow from things like rent geared to income. We know housing's so expensive in the private market that we're seeing less outflow from rent geared to income housing, which means less outflow from shelter into those dedicated or prioritized rent geared to income housing households. So again, that's what we're bringing the strategy in February to look at, is how do we create that flow in the system?
Another issue that's come up with, you know, even with Matthew Perry House, is that supportive housing isn't just for singles. It could be for families. Is that something that has been thought about?
Thank you for the question, Chair. So what we do is we typically partner, in our experience, we usually can partner with different community centers, that kind of thing, to do more light touch supportive housing supports closer to what we see in our housing-based case manager model with the single shelters. We do work with programs like Families First to be able to provide supports in housing. So we haven't seen that critical mass and need, and we use a tool to assess acuity or need level of people through our service prioritization decision assistance tool. It's a mouthful. But based on some of those results when we were collecting them, we did not see that critical mass of need to build supportive housing that's dedicated 24-hour on-site supports the way we see it for singles. So we continue to see higher demand on the single side of things. So that's where we keep pushing. And also we know that, those higher needs individuals need to be paired with health supports, and that needs to happen in a dedicated building where they're able to have that 24-hour on-site support.
Again, thank you very much for all you're doing, and this is great progress, and I think we all appreciate where we're going. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Carr.
Thank you very much. I think probably first of all, I should acknowledge the efforts that have gone into getting people out of the community centres and getting them into more appropriate options. I am in Heron Road Community Centre right now. It was lovely to it's been lovely to see the seniors back here. It's only the Heron Road Senior Centre that's reopened at this time. When Councillor Brockington was speaking about on the previous item about how it's nice to have seniors have a place to stay and have a coffee, I feel the exact same way. But for 4 years, Heron Road was shuttered to the community. So as well as Dempsey Community Centre was also 4 years, and Jim Durrell was just under a year in total. So I know, along with Councillor Plant, that we really bore the brunt of losing our community facilities, which are really important for inclusion, but understanding that we needed to, my residents needed to make, made a sacrifice in order to deal with a homelessness emergency that was declared, with the solution being to put people into community centers. So I'm really happy that this council has gone beyond that and has purchased the facility on St. Joseph and opened up on Queen and continues to make strides. I will just say, Kale, you noted in your presentation that we just finished community consultations on 1245 Kilbourne. I just want to say we just finished them on the first in-person consultations. Consultations are still open. We're moving towards a concept plan, and there'll be lots of communications to follow. So I just want to be clear, in case my community was listening, that we didn't finish consultations on that. Sorry, just on that particular piece. Just in terms of the presentation, there was a comment about addition of beds. I forget the number, and it said permanent shelter and transitional beds. I just want to confirm that we're actually building primarily more permanent transitional beds. Are we actually adding shelter beds to our system?
Thank you, Chair. No, these have all been transitional beds that we're adding. When I refer to that, we call the shelter system, including emergency shelters and transitional housing beds. But yes, they were in the report reference, they're all transitional housing.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. Obviously, we were talking about, the single system. Councillor Kavanagh asked about family system, which I know we'll get that update on input-output. Can we, I do consider youth to be singles, even though they're in a slightly different stream. And with the mayor's recent commitment to ending youth homelessness, is there anything that you can tell us currently on the youth that are using the shelter system? Any update you can provide here, or do we have to wait till February?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Yes, there's some great work happening right now. So the stage we're in after the mayor's announcements is working with the experts in the youth sector to develop what does that 5-year plan look like. As a part of that, we've had immense interest, which is great to see, from the community, not necessarily youth serving organizations, but other fundraising organizations, that kind of thing, that want to partner with us. So we're in the throes of putting together the strategy. I will say some great work already underway is with the Housing Works program through Operation Come Home. As part of that program, we are also housing youth who have children from the shelter system. So we are leveraging every available need to get people directly into that housing. We've been seeing great success with that. So certainly part of the youth strategy, we're going to be focused on independent youth accessing the shelter system, but that doesn't mean that the strategies we're creating are not going to also benefit youth-led families. We know that's a critical need as well.
Okay, thanks very much. And then just on the funding, obviously concerning with respect to federal government funding and provincial funding on a couple parts. With respect to the IHAP funding then, so it's restricted to the first 90 days. So what I understand is that people that are at Queen or that are on St. Joseph, we're only receiving funding for their first 90 days of their stay.
Thank you for the question, Chair. So it is in the agreement saying targeting 90 days worth of stay. It does not disqualify us from using that funding until they get into long-term housing.
Okay, excellent. And when they move on to somebody like a Matthew House or a Cardi House, are we still in some cases receiving funding and working with those organizations there, or does our funding end once they're out of that initial transitional shelter?
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the Matthews Curry House model, those folks going through that model are afforded the same opportunities as anyone in the normal shelter system. So they have access to the housing benefits, rent cleared income housing the same way as anyone in a shelter would. So it essentially follows all the same support model of the rest of the shelter system.
Okay, perfect. And then just in terms of the COB, are we expecting anything in the federal budget that we're all waiting for on November 4th? Do you have any inkling? Like I'm quite concerned about municipalities having to absorb that cost, which is what's gonna happen. Is it not?
Chair, we don't have word yet on exactly what will happen with the National Housing Strategy. We understand that the province and the federal government are in discussions. It is a critical strategy. It's a strategy under which the COB is allocated. And we are deeply concerned about the allocation in Ontario with regard to the COB, and we'll be following up with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, that definitely is something that keeps me up at night because that will have significant impacts on us. So, okay, I'll let somebody else ask questions. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for all the work you did in bringing our community centers back online and getting a proper strategy in place to deal with the housing and homelessness crisis. I know it's been a huge heavy lift, and I know that I have put a lot of pressure on, but I am deeply appreciative and almost burst into tears when I walked into my community center and saw the seniors doing art lessons on the first day that my center was restored. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Hill.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I'm really pleased to, hear my colleague Councillor Carr, who's going before me, speaking about her experience, because certainly I think that's what all of us around the council table wanted to hear, 2-3 years ago when this was starting along. And I know, during COVID, we had to make some hard decisions about emergency action, and those decisions were the right decisions at the time in order to take action to do difficult things. And, as someone that was in the profession of emergency management for 25 years before this, I get it. But that transition back to kind of normal routine operations is difficult. And so I'm extremely appreciative of the work that you've done with Councillor Carr and Plant especially, and the other folks that were directly implicated by the city's reaction to COVID, which then transitioned into this. But it certainly is an amazing news report. So thank you sincerely for the work that you and your team have done on this difficult file. To pick up on my specific questions that I was asking Peter Tilley from the mission, I know that we have limited resources. We don't have what we need in order to fully operationalize, precisely what we want to do in this space. And so anywhere that we can find sunk money is a good thing. And I know that the federal government are invested in defense. They're going to be investing significant monies in this, and I want to make sure that we don't leave any of that money on the table if there are opportunities for us to leverage that in this space. And so my specific question would be, how confident are you right now in our ability to compartmentalize Canadian Forces and veterans members and leverage veterans and defense funding in order to support those operations so that we can free up other municipal dollars to support other folks that aren't necessarily eligible for those programs?
Thank you, Chair. And it's a great question. We've actually, I think the beginning part of this solving the issue is knowing what issue we're dealing with, the size and scope of it. So we've done some immense work through our Built for Zero program, which is a specific veterans task force working group we have. And this is really convened around housing and homelessness. One of the things we've done through actually the support of the city-led veterans group is we've started to collect that data. We'd had a really we've collected it everywhere in terms of our homeless shelters, but we're expanding that across our HIFIS program, so other city-funded programs around the housing and homelessness space. And recently, through the leadership of the council-based table, we've also expanded that to the housing registry. So we're going to start to get some really good data. People who may not be in the homelessness system, but people are precariously housed or low income enough to qualify for rent geared to income housing or the housing registry. So that's really positive. What I would also say is the city, I'll say I have a canned proposal, but we had applied last year. There was a $73 million fund to support veterans homelessness and veterans housing. And unfortunately, we weren't successful for our ask, which was around $3 million. That said, we're very well positioned when new federal funding opportunities come out in this space to actually have something that was community developed in terms of a proposal to address those gaps that we see in the data. And as we have that updated data, better data, we can update that proposal with the continued need and be more accurate on our points within that.
Well, thank you very much for that. And certainly, if I can be of any assistance in assisting with that, please do reach out. I would be happy to help. I know in one particular instance, and I know that we've been working on that over the last year or so, there was a need that was identified to me with regards to female veterans. And specific programming that could support them that would complement the operations at Veterans House. And so certainly if that type of program requires any assistance, I'm happy to assist with that. But thank you very much for that programming, for what you do, and for this report. It's amazing news. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And like everyone else, great report and great progress and results. Not easy, but it's good to see progress in this regard. I have two questions. One is members of council, as of yesterday, been starting to get questions. It looks like a form letter about how we're preparing for winter and how people who are unhoused will be accommodated. Slide 5 in your presentation today talked about winter readiness. You do comment about it in the report. Do you have something that's available for us to share with members of the public who are writing to us on this matter?
Yes, Chair, we can create a response that reflects what is in the report and what was in the presentation, and we'll circulate that today.
Great, thank you so much. My other question is regarding the city's work when partner organizations that the city partners with takes people out of the shelter system, puts them into housing. Many people also need wraparound services or complementary services as part of their stay. Mr. Tilley referenced the Shepherds on Maryville, which we're all too familiar with in my ward. Can you just elaborate for me what the city's role is in working with our partner organizations to ensure that we maximize successful outcomes for residents? I'll park sort of the impacts on the community at this moment, but to ensure success, housing, of course, is one thing. But if people come with, let's just say, moderate acuity, what is the exact role of the City of Ottawa in this case?
Thank you for the question, Chair. So we provide an oversight role in terms of the operation. So one of the things we look to do is work with the provider to make sure that whatever acuity or level of need that they're serving is adequately supported on site. I think 1095 was a great example. As we build new supportive housing and see the need in the community increase, we need to change our response to be in line to make sure those outcomes are successful for the community and for the residents. As you saw from our supportive housing audit, we had an audit committee a number of months ago. So it's very clear that we are lacking those intensive health supports for high needs clients. So what we're going to be doing through that audit is updating and creating standards so that residents, the community, and the clients we serve within those programs, it's very clear what the expectations are on all three sides. That was very clearly outlined in the audit. But also, I think more on the client side of things is that we'll be able to, with this and the Bumblebee project that you'd heard briefly about from Mark at Salis, is that we'll actually work to plan out what's our long-term plan with the capital funding, because one of the challenges we continually have is the capital funding comes without the operating funding. So the city's always scrambling to make this up, a lot of the time often not being able to roll out the health supports or the level of need that serves that high need community member that we're trying to do. So it's about lining all of those up and then putting them into a financial plan so the different levels of government understand our operating need there. And I think from the community and client side, in all of our providers is standardizing it through creating, like we have the shelter standards, transitional housing standards, residential service home standards, that it's a very clear, extensive document saying how the exact programming will work based on the level of need and how does inflow, outflow between programs work. So it's a thing we're going to be defining more, but working all the time to improve as we see that need in the community increase.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I appreciate that
I'll
answer.
just add, if possible. Sorry to interrupt you, Councillor.
No, go ahead, please.
I'll just add that there's an opportunity here, especially to continue the advocacy that we're doing to other levels of government, and especially to the province with regard to Ministry of Health funding, to help us augment the operational funding that we're receiving from the Ministry, Municipal Affairs and Housing with the health funding that we need on site to make supportive housing successful. And so you heard from Mark McCauley, and they are health funded agencies, so they can certainly, they're successful in attracting health funding. But what we're really seeing is a true focus on primary care, linking people who don't have family doctors, which is 100% needed. But what we're not getting a lot of traction on is an integrated funding approach between the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing and the Ministry of Health so that we can actually augment occupational therapists. You heard about other therapy, nurse practitioners. That's the kind of advocacy that we're doing at staff level. And it would be the kind of key messages for associations such as AMO or FCM. They would benefit as well from some of those key messages in terms of the conversations that are potentially occurring with the Ministry of Health personnel.
Excellent. Thank you for that. You know, across the street from 1095 Marival, I have an OCH center, and about 40% of residents are also Salis clients. Salis actually has an office in the building. And when I met with Salis and OCH about a year ago, my intent was, what resources do you need? Because we have such a high concentration of residents who have, supportive, who have these needs. And I think back to the comment about creating standards, that helps us when we are responding to inquiries from the public about visions to expand residential facilities in mature neighborhoods. We need to be able to reassure folks that there are standards that need to be met. And the fact that we acknowledge they haven't in the past provides me some comfort because we have to make improvements. We have to do better. And I see that in reports like this and the realization that it's not just housing, it's housing plus supports for people who have that acuity. So I appreciate that very much. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Councillor Plon.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of circle back a bit. I mean, I think it's great we're talking about transition housing. We're talking about the community centers being given back to the communities. All that is fantastic. But what I'm also hearing is that for our emergency shelters, which I believe, Kale, you said there'll always be a need for them, that still means that the majority of emergency shelters, actually most of the majority of the emergency shelters will stay in Ward 12. As people need emergency shelters, they'll still be located in Ward 12. And even as you house people, the backfill will still go into Ward 12. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question, Chair. So in terms of our long-term strategy, we do want to reduce emergency shelter beds. So I know you talked with Stephen about his strategy. That's what we're trying to do is I think everyone agrees within the shelter system is that we want to spread the need around the community. That's why when we look at supportive housing, we're trying to make sure that at every available opportunity, we are moving things outside of the ward in terms of high needs services. I think the other thing to consider with this is that the number of emergency shelter beds, one of the challenges that we kind of heard from Clara and is that we don't have the level of health support. So I think the other thing we want to underscore here is a lot of the challenges we're seeing in the community is because we don't have the intensive health supports in shelter transitional housing to get those folks out. So in terms of the long-term solution, I don't see a world where we have, 600 plus emergency shelter beds across our system. The whole goal of our housing homelessness leadership table is we want to move away from that, moving towards that supportive housing. And I'll call it one of the models we've been chatting about kind of internally at that group is transitional supportive housing. So you may not need those 24-hour intensive supports all the time, but creating that system flow is really the gap here. And then the other piece I'll mention as well that's a key to reducing the number of emergency shelter beds is having intensive diversion. So Peter meant we do fund diversion workers, but we don't necessarily do an amazing job at really defining shelter eligibility. One of the things we're considering in that February report is going to be things like, do we look at residency requirements? How do we make sure that Ottawa is well positioned to support the clients that we do have? We're hearing that from your ward, the police, that this is a challenge. So those are some of the strategies we're implementing to try and move away from that emergency shelter model, but it will take time.
So if I hear you correctly, the 800 plus emergency shelter beds are in Ward 12 and they're going to stay in Ward 12 for the indefinite future. Just yes or no, please.
I guess, can I ask, what would you define as indefinite future? Because the intent is that year over year, we're reducing the number of beds. So in terms of moving the emergency shelter beds elsewhere, no, we do not have a plan immediately.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm looking. Oh, Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Sorry. Someone always says something and then I always have a follow-up. So I just in terms of Councillor Plant's question, and I think we all know the pain that she feels with everything being concentrated there, but did we have a reduction in shelter beds because the SHEPs opened up new supportive units at 216 Murray? Because I thought that we were supposed to reduce by 56 beds the amount of shelter beds.
Thank you, Chair. Those are actually part of our winter plan. So as you saw the numbers there, they are trending very positively. And the first beds to close are the 48 that Councillor Plant has in her ward. So we're looking, they're the primary overflow beds we're doing, and we're looking to fill up those other sites where we currently have capacity. Of course, the one thing we need to consider before implementing that plan and giving timelines is that we want to make sure that the winter response is sufficient. You heard we have over 500 people are currently unsheltered, so we don't want to act too early and then have to reactivate something. We really want to make these permanent changes and making sure we're having and utilizing those beds that are permanent and sustainable.
Okay, the plan was to remove those from permanent inventory. You're just using them as part of the emergency response for this year, correct? Did I get that right?
Thank you, Chair. That's correct. They're being used as overflow. So the first thing in the shelter system, we have designated beds at most shelters that are designated as overflow. I would say what Shepherd's Good Hope has is designated overflow. So they would be the first to close of any of our overflow beds.
Okay, thanks. I look forward to following up on that convo potentially later. It's when we get the report back in February. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carr. I'm not seeing any further questions. This is a phenomenal report. We've come a long way, but we have a long way to go. And I think that, as much as the delegations were speaking the praises of what we've done, it is quite clear to myself, to my colleagues, and I know to staff that there's still a lot of needs in our community, but we're on the right trajectory. And I will note too that in addition to budget, which we'll be discussing, we'll also be discussing the 10-year housing and homelessness plan.
and all the work that's gone into that, and that we can, once again, look to the future for our community and future investments in coordination with our partners and our stakeholders. So I wanted to thank members of the community and the organizations that we partner with as a city. I would like to thank staff, and I also want to thank my colleagues. This has been a very tremendous undertaking as a term of council priority to fully focus on the needs of our community from housing and a homelessness standpoint. And I know that these conversations are not always easy. So I wanted to thank them for their commitment to this. Seeing as there are no other questions or comments, is this item carried?
Carried.
Great. Thank you very much. So we're going to move on to item 7. There are no in-camera items. So we'll go to 8.1, which is sports field and grass maintenance best practices. Our councillor colleague, Councillor Hill, has asked this to be lifted to the agenda for, I think, a comment. We don't have any delegations on this item. With the will of committee, can we add this item to the agenda? Okay, see no concerns. It is added. Councillor Hill, I believe you wanted to speak to this.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I just have a few questions for General Manager Chenier on this topic. It's stated in the report that Ottawa is unique due to our geography, weather, and number of sports fields. What municipalities did you compare Ottawa to in this study, and why were those cities selected?
Chair Andrea from Public Works will help us out with that.
Thank you. So yes, the City of Ottawa reached out to municipalities across the country, and we did focus on those that have similar features to us. We are a very unique city due to the fact of our weather, our geographic size, and the number of fields that we have. So we focused on those that had at least one of those elements as a priority. So geographic size, for example, Chatham is large as we are, although they do have many fewer fields than us. We focused on those with similar weather. So Winnipeg would be one of the 29 that we reached out to or that responded. And then also just number of fields. There's municipalities across the country that have comparable number of fields to us.
Okay, thank you. We currently cut our sports field grass to 2.5 inches. Why was that length selected?
That was selected based on a few elements, one being through the expertise of staff when it comes to the quality of the grass. So we want to prevent things like scorching. We want to prevent the development of weeds. So when it comes to the ability to maintain and ensure the best quality of the grass, it's about 2.4, 2.5 was deemed by staff as the best, and that's within best practices.
Okay, 5 other municipalities cut their grass to a shorter length. Could you clarify which cities those are and why those cities are able to operate at a shorter length than Ottawa?
Yes, I will provide that through the chair. So Woodstock cuts to 2.25. They do have fewer fields than us. So in terms of the regular maintenance, it would be easier for them than us, although we don't have the comparison in terms of staff. Grimsby cuts to about 2, but those are irrigated fields that are cut to 2 inches. Port Colborne cuts to 2 to 3, so they're still within the range, but they do sometimes cut shorter. Again, they have fewer fields. Vancouver cuts to 2. They cut twice a week. For our highest level diamonds, we do aim to do it 3 times a week. So we actually cut more often than Vancouver would in those. Bradford West Gwillimbury cuts 2 inches for tournaments only, but 2.5 normally. And then as mentioned, we cut at about 2.4, 2.5.
Okay, and could you speak to some of the reasons that Ottawa would be constrained with regards to looking at options at mowing to heights lower than 2.5 inches on the baseball diamonds?
2.5. So there's a few elements. One, again, is the quality of the field itself and the grass, so maintaining that quality of grass. Also consistency. We cannot change the height of mowers. So if there was a desire to bring some to 2.5 and some to more, the mowers are significant units. They are not the simple hand mowers. So they actually have to be brought back to the yard to adjust the height. So we do have to have the same height across the city, no matter whether it's a community, small neighborhood, or a higher level field.
You're currently working on a wet field policy. How will this policy support the maintenance of our sports fields?
Yes, it is a guideline that we're working on, and it's to really protect the fields. We want to make sure that what's already in practice is written down. So we do currently have limitations when the fields are very wet, when they're going to be damaged. We want to protect them as best as we can. So the guidelines will just put it into practice and formally.
This year, the city launched a ball diamond maintenance trail project where casual employees complete the maintenance work that can't be done from a mower. You'll be assessing the project next year based on reduced 311 calls. How has the project done to date based on that metric?
Yes, thank you. And through the chair, our 311 calls, we've just within less than a year started to separate them from the actual raking of the infield, which is what these casuals are doing. So we don't have the metrics exactly on that yet. We will by next year. Having said that, we've seen a significant reduction in overall calls, about half as many as last year in terms of service requests. So overall, the diamonds are quite improved from the service requests. We've also been speaking with stakeholders, and to date, the feedback is that there has been improvements. There's always more to do. We will always work on continuously improving, but it has, in our opinion, shown improvement.
Okay, and to that point, how will you be looking to improve the trial in year 2?
We will, one, in terms of the measurement. So now that we have these service requests, we can pulled apart, we can better measure to determine to evaluate. And again, based on some of the feedback that we've had, we will be looking at next year. Is there anything further that can do? However, based on the training that was offered, these casuals and the work, it has been quite successful to date, in our opinion.
And for weekend maintenance options, you discuss cost recovery. What can a baseball club expect to pay if they take advantage of this program?
Thanks, through the chair. This is a little bit of a difficult one answer specifically because it would depend on the event itself. So some events might be literally across from the city from Orleans to Canada. So there would have to be multiple beats, so multiple staff teams doing it. So it really depends on the size. I do have an example of one that we looked at this past year that didn't move forward. So it was for some provincials, and it would have been $180 a day for garbage pickup, and then an additional $580 a day in terms of the maintenance. And this is because, again, we need multiple individuals to do this work.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Thank you very much, Andrea. Seeing no further questions, is this item received?
Received.
Received. We also had 8.2 community-led greening initiatives and gardening program, but I haven't had anyone indicate that they wanted to lift this. I think we've lost almost all our members also. So we're going to keep chugging along. We'll receive that one. We have no notices of motion, and we have no inquiries that I'm aware of, and seeing none. So we are going to move to adjournment. Our next meeting is Tuesday, November 25th, 2025. I'm going to remind folks to pack a lunch. It's going to be budget. So I look forward to some conversation at that time. Are we adjourned? Adjourned? Wonderful. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you, Chair.